My name is Elise. I'm 33 years old and work in a corporate job. I've been married to Luke for 2 years. He's 3 years older than me and works at a company similar to mine. Since we got married, we've been living with his parents in a 2-family home. Luke has one older brother, Cody, who's 6 years older than him. Before Luke and I got married, Cody and his wife, Chris, were living with their parents. Chris talks a lot and is very competitive, which often caused arguments with her mother-in-law. Eventually, Cody and his dad got tired of the fights and decided to move out. Luke had been living on his own before we got married, so neither of us thought about living with his parents. But then, his mom suddenly told us, "After you get married, you'll be living with us." Both my parents and Luke were shocked. I thought we'd stay in my apartment until we had kids, as it was more convenient for me to commute. We were both surprised, but we decided it would be easier to live at his parents' house since the commutes would be the same. Their house, built by Luke's grandfather, is old but has a main house and a guest house. We thought we would have enough privacy, so we agreed to move in. However, after moving in, I quickly regretted it. Luke's mom, who's in her 60s, started complaining about back pain and dizziness. She gave all the housework to me, including cleaning, laundry, and shopping. I work full-time, so even sharing chores with Luke didn't leave us enough time for our own lives, let alone his parents. On top of that, we had unexpected financial problems. The guest house needed major repairs. When we first saw it, it looked fine from the outside, but inside it was falling apart. We agreed to pay for the renovations since it was our space, but when my mother-in-law saw the finished guest house, she insisted that we fix up the main house too. She said, "You can't fix up the guest house and leave us living in a rundown house." We couldn't afford to fix everything at once, but she didn't care. She said, "Why is Elise working if she's not helping her in-laws?" She also wanted new expensive furniture and appliances, saying that the renovated rooms needed the best. On top of that, they made us pay for everything, even small things like green onions or toilet paper. Despite trying to save money by bringing our own food, my in-laws ordered takeout every day. Guess who paid for it? We did, using the family card that Luke was forced to get. This situation has made it hard for Luke and me to save any money. Every month, we stress out trying to balance the family budget right before the credit card bill is due. Luke and I had talked to my in-laws many times, telling them that we appreciated everything, but they needed to ease up. Luke even pointed out that they were making us pay for everything, from the renovations to daily expenses, utilities, and even property taxes. We were covering it all. His parents responded by saying, "Supporting your parents is natural," and scolded us harshly. This led to us both getting upset and crying, hoping it would make them listen. This situation had been going on for over 2 years. As we were about to enter our 3rd year living with them, things took a turn. My mother-in-law and Cody, Luke's brother, suddenly told us that we had to move out because they were moving in. Chris, Cody's wife, explained that Cody had been laid off. She said Cody had chosen to be laid off to help a colleague with kids, calling him kind-hearted. I was shocked. "How irresponsible can you be? You have twin babies yourself." I said, "How will you afford living if you move back home?" She mentioned that Cody had graduated from a top university, unlike Luke, and could easily find another job. So, I asked why he couldn't just find another place to live. She said he had no choice because he was living in company housing, which he had to leave by the end of the month. She also added that at least Chris wasn't a disappointing daughter-in-law like me for not having given them grandkids yet. Luke and I were frustrated and upset. We sat there for 2 hours while his parents argued with us on their comfy sofa. Finally, we had enough. "Fine, we'll move out this week," I said. Luke agreed, saying, "We've learned a lot from you, and now it's time to put that wisdom into practice." So, we made the decision to leave. 2 weeks later, we had movers scheduled and packed up everything. We planned the move during my in-laws' usual lunch at karaoke, so there wouldn't be any complaints about the things we were taking. We finished everything in 3 days, using our paid leave, and started our new life. Then, one day at work, I got a call from the front desk saying someone from my family was there to see me. I had a feeling my mother-in-law would show up soon, but I didn't expect her to come to see me instead of Luke. I quickly texted Luke, "She went to your place." "Huh? Sorry for the trouble," he replied. "No worries, but what should we do? I don't want to cause trouble at work." I suggested, "Just tell Maya to step out for a meeting. Do you think that'll work?" Luke responded, "Cody has 1-year-old twins himself. What's he going to do about expenses if he moves in?" I texted back, "Got it." I passed the message to the front desk, and my in-laws left as planned. That night, as Luke and I drove back to our in-laws' compound, we saw them, along with Cody and his wife, rush out of the main house and the guest house to greet us. Upon a closer look, I saw that both my mother-in-law and father-in-law had a baby strapped to their backs, probably Cody's twins. As I was locking the car, Cody shouted angrily, "Hey, how dare you show up here in my parents' cars?" Luke responded calmly, "Your parents' cars? Which ones?" This made Cody even angrier. "The cars you both drove up in," he yelled. I answered, "Well, Cody, both these cars were bought by us. Our names are even on the registration. Do you want to see?" Luke added, "Exactly. I've been annoyed by how our parents drive these cars like they own them. We let it slide because we were living together, but now there's no reason to let them borrow them." I also reminded him, "And don't forget that dad-in-law has that old minivan he used for work." At this point, Christ, who had been glaring at us, jumped in. "Who cares about that old car?" I responded, "But it's perfect for twins, isn't it? You can fit 2 car seats in the back." This back and forth made our in-laws uncomfortable, but then the topic shifted. Cody asked, "What about the furniture and the appliances? Taking those while we're away is stealing, not just from the main house, but from the guest house too." He and Christ both complained they couldn't live without those things. That's when Luke calmly said, "Why should we have to leave them?" I said, "Look, I get that we're using the guest house, but there's no reason to take stuff from the main house too." Things started to heat up when I asked, "Isn't that stuff something we all pitched in for?" Luke's dad shot back, "Once you give something, it's ours." Luke responded calmly, "Hold on, we never gave you anything, we just lent it to you. There's no paperwork saying it's yours." Both his parents were shocked by his response. Luke kept going, "We lived together, so we lent stuff as a courtesy. Now that we're living separately, why should we keep lending it to you? We're taking back what's ours. Is that a problem?" Luke and I smiled at each other, and everyone seemed to come to their senses. Then his parents asked, "But we have washing machines and fridges too. You don't need 2 of each." Luke answered, "Exactly, so why not lend them to us again?" I added, "Well, with all the stuff we've moved, it's getting cramped in our new place." Luke and I smiled, agreeing, "It's a tight fit right now." Christy started to speak, but we cut her off. "Remember, it's a storage room, so it's supposed to be cramped," I said. We both laughed, then added, "Until the official contract is done, this is how it has to be." Our in-laws were left confused. Then Luke dropped a bombshell, "By the way, we're moving to Boston next month." Luke explained that both of us had been offered jobs at the corporate headquarters, but we had turned them down because we were living with my in-laws. Now that we were moving out, we had both accepted the transfers and got internal notifications for new positions at the headquarters. If all goes well, we could work there until retirement. Then Luke added, "By the way, a colleague of mine is moving overseas for a while and wanted to sell his high-rise condo." Everything lined up perfectly. My in-laws were shocked. "Wait, you're going to live in a high-rise condo in Boston? How did that happen?" Luke smiled and said, "Life's funny, huh? If Cody and the gang hadn't told us to move out, we wouldn't have stumbled onto this." One of my in-laws asked, "How can you afford a high-rise condo? That seems impossible." Luke explained, "That's thanks to Elise's dad. He helped with the down payment. My sister is inheriting the family property, so this is kind of a trade-off. Plus, the condo's previous owner gave us a big discount because we agreed to store his modern altar while he's away." Luke added, "With that discount, it feels like we're the ones getting the better deal." At that moment, Christy, who had been standing nearby, burst into tears, saying, "That's so unfair. I'd rather live in a high-rise in Boston than in Atlanta." The in-laws, who had been quiet until now, suddenly started praising Luke, saying, "Looks like Luke really has it together, doesn't he? Like mother, like son." But Luke ignored them completely and turned to me. They said, "Living in a high-rise in Boston? Everyone's going to be jealous. When are you moving? We must visit." Luke smiled and said, "Why visit for just a short time? If we're going to Boston, you should come too." The in-laws agreed, "That's an interesting idea." But Cody and Christy were not happy. Cody snapped at them, "What are you talking about? Cody's being downsized, so you'll have to support us. Plus, until I find another job, Christy will have to go back to work, and you'll have to take care of the house and the twins." The tension grew, and Cody and Christy marched up to the in-laws, who were holding the twins. The babies started crying, and their cries woke up the entire neighborhood. The neighbors, who had heard the shouting and crying, were now watching from a distance. My in-laws looked embarrassed and turned red. They looked at Luke, waiting for him to say something. Luke smiled and said, "So this is a battle between a raccoon and a fox, huh?" Turning to the people around him, he explained, "If neither of our families works together, our finances will collapse next month." Christy, upset, asked what he meant. I added, "Christy, you thought that if Cody lost his job and moved back into his parents' house, you could just shift the utility bills and groceries onto them, right? Well, we've been paying for everything around here, and you can't rely on us anymore." Luke continued, "And starting next month, you'll need to help with the mortgage payments for the house renovation. The loan is in my father's name, not ours." Christy asked why it was in his father's name, and Luke explained, "I wanted the loan in my name since I was paying for it, but my dad insisted it would be shameful, so we used the house as collateral. We've been transferring money to his account to cover the loan, but now Cody needs to start helping." My in-laws and Cody didn't like that, but Luke stood firm. "We're giving up the inheritance, Cody, since you'll inherit the house. It's time to take care of your parents and the house." When my mother-in-law insisted that children should always take care of their parents, Luke replied, "Well, considering we've been covering your living expenses and the loan payments for the last 2 years, I think that pretty much balances out any future caregiving costs I'd have as a son." Luke turned to me and said, "Let's go home, love." I said, "Goodbye, everyone. I doubt we'll meet again. Take care." The next day, Luke and I sold the furniture and appliances we'd moved from the main house, along with 2 cars we wouldn't need anymore. When Christy texted asking if she could have the items, I simply replied, "Why?" and blocked her. After that, we used up all our remaining vacation days to finish moving into the new apartment. Buying the high-rise condo would take more time, so we decided to rent for the first year, thanks to my boss, who owned the place. One weekend, after all the stress, Luke and I were able to relax. As we looked at the city lights, Luke broke the silence. "I know I've been a hassle this time, but thanks for sticking with me." I teased him, asking, "What's with the formal tone all of a sudden?" But Luke continued, "When we first got married, I should have thought more about the idea of living together. Back then, I was just happy that you chose me over Cody, since we were always compared growing up. We've been following our parents' wishes without really thinking, and when they told us to move out so they could bring Cody and his family in, I realized how they had been a burden on us for so long." Luke went on, "Then I thought about how much your parents must worry about you because of your situation, so I sent them an apology email. They said they'd forgive the past as long as we promised to make their daughter happy in the future. After that, they gave us the down payment for the condo without hesitation." Luke promised to do everything he could to protect our life together and our future, especially if we were blessed with children. Meanwhile, it seems like my in-laws are struggling. They're even using their retirement income to barely cover the home renovation loan. They can't afford to support 2 households anymore, and Cody's efforts to find a new job have failed. Christy had to go back to work early, and now the family relies on her salary and the money my in-laws earn from part-time jobs at a local senior center. Arguments have become frequent and loud, often overheard by the neighbors. A former colleague of mine texted, saying there's gossip that my in-laws might be planning to leave town. They've cut off all contact with Luke and me, and when they tried to reach out to us, my dad immediately changed his phone number. Considering how they'd always belittled my family and never bothered with any pre-marriage courtesies, changing the phone number was a small but important step. Now they have almost no way to contact us. What goes around, comes around.
A factory worker father hurriedly excused himself upon her announcement. As soon as she uttered those words, my stepmother, with a wicked grin, impulsively splashed tea onto my dad's face. Beside her, she burst into laughter. Surprisingly, my stepfather made no effort to reprimand her. The stain on the suit my dad had meticulously cleaned for this occasion rapidly expanded. Fortunately, the tea was lukewarm, nearly cold, alleviating concerns about burns. Amidst my astonishment, I handed a napkin to my dad while Tom, in a panic, tried to dry his father-in-law's suit. Even in the midst of worrying about potential injuries, Tom couldn't help but laugh at the absurd behavior of his parents. Throughout this chaos, my dad remained silent, stood upright, and pointed at them, declaring, "Well then, I'll just ruin your company." The unfamiliar sternness in his voice caught me off guard. He took my hand, and we left the chaotic scene behind. Tom scolded his parents before quickly joining us. "I'm really sorry, father-in-law. I'll make my parents apologize later. He apologized, but my dad, with a grave tone, reassured him, no need. We're done with them anyway. He patted Tom's shoulder as we walked away from the tumultuous O'Connor household. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Yvonne Warner, a 26-year-old office worker. Raised by my single father after losing my mother at a young age, I admired his dedication to both work and family. My father, in charge of a factory, managed to attend all my school events, even if he had to rush back to work afterward. In college, I met Tom, 2 years my senior, who was gentle, sincere, and polite. Despite his popularity, he accepted my confession, but there were concerns about his relationship with his parents, which he didn't elaborate on. We continued to date, and although Tom lived alone, he occasionally visited his parents, always looking exhausted afterward. Tom prioritized me in our relationship, and I was proud of him. I wanted to introduce him to my dad, and when the day finally came, it was a mix of fear and excitement. Surprisingly, my dad and Tom got along well, and I felt relieved to see the two important men in my life getting along. Yet Tom's odd excitement after the meeting left me puzzled, and he evaded any further questions about it. As Tom and I had seemingly hit it off with my dad, I couldn't shake off a growing worry that perhaps Tom's feelings were not as positive as he claimed. This anxiety lingered, leading Tom to request an important conversation a few days later. Nervously anticipating the discussion about our recent encounter with my dad, I met Tom at the agreed-upon cafe. Upon reaching the cafe, I noticed Tom already seated, his face wearing a gloomy expression visible through the glass. Suppressing my own anxiety, I approached him with a cheerful greeting. "Tom, sorry, did you wait long?" I softly spoke as I reached him. Startled by my touch on his shoulder, Tom exclaimed, "Whoa, Yvonne, you scared me." After a deep breath, he continued, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you. Please, have a seat." Sitting across from Tom, I ordered from the waiter, my concern mounting as Tom's downcast expression persisted. Hoping to encourage him to share his thoughts, I spoke up, "Hey, Tom, what's bothering you so much? Is there something wrong with my dad?" Tom, taken aback by the direct question, denied any issue with my dad, stating, "Absolutely not. I respect your dad. It's just that my. He trailed off, avoiding eye contact. Sensing the need to delve deeper, I sighed and pressed him. "If you're worried about something, I want to know what's on your mind." Tom took a deep breath, as if preparing himself, and began to disclose a shocking revelation. According to him, his parents were judgmental and lacked class, constantly interfering in his life. When he introduced a girlfriend, his parents would criticize her on the spot, leading to tearful breakups. Tom desired to marry me but was troubled by the prospect of involving his parents in our marriage. Assuring him that we didn't have to include them in our union, I suggested enduring their presence during the wedding formalities. Reminding him that my dad liked him, I thought the matter was settled, but Tom had more to share. He revealed that when he met my dad, he was surprised by the stark contrast to his own parents. Expressing a desire to become the son of such a great man, Tom shared his dilemma about marriage. While he was pleased that my dad liked him, he couldn't decide whether his parents should also become his in-laws. Tom brightened momentarily but sighed deeply afterward. In a moment of realization, Tom looked up and apologized. He proposed a unique solution. When we meet his parents for our marriage, could my dad come along? Tom hoped that the presence of someone so respectable might eventually influence his parents positively. I agreed to discuss it with my dad, but I couldn't help expressing my wish that Tom had approached the conversation differently. Understanding his misstep, Tom quickly apologized and then, with newfound determination, formally proposed marriage to me. Swiftly deciding to discuss the matter with my father, who was initially hesitant, I approached him with Tom when he formally asked for my hand in marriage. After obtaining my father's agreement, Tom and I arranged a date to meet his parents. On the appointed day, dressed in our best attire, we stood at the front door of Tom's family home, preparing to meet his parents for the first time. Given the unsettling stories I had heard about Tom's parents, my nerves were understandably on edge. My father, attempting to lighten the mood, encouraged us not to be too tense, assuring that Tom's parents were just overly concerned. His supportive pat on the back eased my anxiety slightly. When Tom rang the doorbell, there was no response, causing a momentary panic. Tom rang again, but still, there was silence. Not wanting to create a bad impression, Tom excused himself and entered the house first, leaving my father and me exchanging concerned glances. After what seemed like an eternity, Tom reappeared, looking flustered. Before I could inquire about the delay, he made excuses with a forced smile, promising us they would be ready soon. My father sighed in exasperation, and I couldn't shake the growing worry that this incident might jeopardize our wedding plans. Finally, Tom ushered us inside, where his parents awaited us. However, their demeanor was peculiar. His mother greeted us with a sleek grin, while his father seemed disinterested, looking away. Despite the tense atmosphere, I decided to proceed with the introductions. Tom, regaining composure, introduced both my parents and me. Despite the warmth of his thoughtful introduction, his parents sneered, and the atmosphere remained strained. In an awkward turn of events, Tom's mother splashed tea on my father, staining the suit he had meticulously cleaned for the occasion. Shocked, I offered my dad a handkerchief while Tom panickedly tried to wipe off the tea stains. His parents, laughing in response, only fueled Tom's anger. My father, standing up, pointed at them and declared, "Then I'll ruin your company," a tone and statement I had never heard from him before. Taking my hand, he left the house, leaving Tom's parents in the wake of Tom's scolding. Returning to our house with Tom, my father changed clothes, and Tom earnestly apologized for the incident. I could hear my dad's troubled voice during their conversation. Although I was shocked by Tom's parents' actions, I knew they wouldn't be easy to get along with. Seated on the living room sofa, clenching my fists, I replayed the event in my mind, seething at the insult directed at my dad. When my dad and Tom finished changing, Tom immediately apologized to me, almost bowing down, expressing regret for not anticipating such behavior from his parents. His sincerity was evident, and he didn't even ask for forgiveness. Feeling the need to apologize as well, I took Tom's hand as he kneeled on the floor, expressing my regret for suggesting the meeting without fully understanding the situation. Unexpectedly, the situation took a serious turn, and I felt compelled to apologize to my father for the unintended consequences of my thoughtless suggestion. His troubled expression and shrugged shoulders conveyed the difficulty in addressing the situation. Determined to understand the gravity of my dad's threat, I sought clarification. "Dad, was what you said true? Are you really going to ruin their company?" To my question, my dad glanced at Tom and nodded firmly, affirming his intent. My father, the CEO of a renowned local enterprise, revealed that their business was already struggling. As the factory manager and CEO, he had started as a worker in the very factory, sacrificing his dream of becoming a painter to raise me alone after my mother's passing. He worked tirelessly and climbed the corporate ladder through several promotions. Eventually, he took over as the CEO when the former CEO retired. During our recent visit to Tom's family home, we discovered that one of the subsidiaries managed by Tom's father, my father-in-law, belonged to my dad's company. Unfortunately, Tom's parents' prejudices and Tom's mother's premature actions prevented this from being clarified, leading to the present situation. My father explained that his company faced management difficulties, contemplating downsizing without resorting to layoffs. Regret was evident in his words as he considered the impact on his employees. After Tom's serious conversation with my father, he proposed closing down the subsidiary where Tom's parents worked. Concerned about the consequences for Tom's parents, my father questioned if Tom was okay with it. Tom, resolute and having cut ties with his parents, expressed a desire for them to reflect on their actions. Despite the difficulty, he requested permission to get engaged with me. Moved by Tom's earnestness, I also pleaded with my father to allow our engagement. My father, crossing his arms, pondered Tom's words. Despite the recent incident, he eventually gave his approval, setting a condition related to Tom's parents being company executives. My father demanded to know Tom's plan for the employees and made it clear that our marriage would be off if Tom couldn't handle this responsibly. A few days later, Tom presented a plan to my father for his father's company's employees. He had arranged a meeting with my father to discuss possible job placements for all the employees. Tom showed genuine concern for their transition and offered to work for free until they were settled and producing results. He expressed his eagerness to compensate for any shortcomings with his work and salary, and once settled, to re-engage with me. Tom, demonstrating his earnestness, saw himself as partly responsible for his company's collapse and wished to be a positive force in the situation. Upon returning home, I discovered that our marriage would be delayed due to an unavoidable circumstance. When I greeted my father, he expressed, "Welcome back, Ivan. You heard right. I'm sorry for deciding such an important thing on my own, but I thought it wouldn't be fair if I were the only one happy." While he apologized, I seized the opportunity to propose working in the company with Tom, offering to work for free. I insisted that my father should accept Tom's proposal. Despite Tom's attempts to dissuade me, I desperately begged my father, who initially remained silent. After repeated pleas, he uncrossed his arms and quietly nodded. Meanwhile, Tom's parents had yet to apologize. My father seemed to have been waiting for them, but the time had passed. He began preparations to take over Tom's father's company. Time passed, and the day arrived when the company collapsed. Tom's parents summoned us to their home, where a crowd of former employees protested the company's closure. They accused us of being the root of all evil and blamed me for seducing Tom and ingratiating myself with my father. Despite the accusations, Tom attempted to calm the former employees, explaining the situation and offering new job placements. Ignoring his parents' outbursts, Tom apologized for the inconvenience caused and promised to work with dedication. The former employees, reassured by Tom's efforts, began leaving, relieved and grateful. As they departed, my father promised to inform them of the details later. In the aftermath, Tom's parents continued to fuss about their predicament. Tom sighed in exasperation at their blame shifting, expressing concern about losing their house used as collateral. Despite their pleas, Tom's parents were met with indifference as the former employees had already heard the truth from Tom and disregarded the parents' desperate appeals. My father also ignored their words, and the former employees left relieved, leaving Tom's parents to confront the consequences of their actions. "I don't care what you think. You got what you deserved, so it can't be helped. Why don't you learn a little remorse?" My father reprimanded Tom's parents, who seemed oblivious to our scolding. Unable to bear their persistence any longer, I finally lost my patience. "Haven't you just caused trouble for Tom all this time, boasting about being business owners and only caring about titles? Isn't that why this happened?" My words left his parents speechless, seemingly ready to retort, but halted by my father's decisive intervention. He made it clear that he wouldn't allow them to speak further. A business owner is supposed to take responsibility. You should at least complete your final task properly. Left without a response, Tom's parents were scolded collectively and could say nothing more. Leaving them behind, we left the scene. And eventually, Tom's parents lost everything: the company, the house, and the land. They never provided any guarantees to the former employees and evaded responsibility. After losing everything, they reached out to Tom for help. But having cut ties with them, Tom coldly turned them away. Now, they were probably in jail, and we heard nothing from them since. Even if they got out, they still had a debt to the former employees, so the situation remained dire. Afterward, Tom and I quit our jobs and joined my father's company. Living off our savings in the first month, we worked for free as promised. One day, we encountered a former employee of Tom's parents' company at work. Eager to shake our hands at the new workplace, the employee expressed their gratitude to my father for giving them a chance. Thanks to Tom for arranging the job, and also conveyed many thanks to me. Despite not remembering the specific incident, I had apparently helped that person carry materials. After expressing immense gratitude, the former employee left, expressing a desire to keep working hard. Feeling somewhat redeemed by his words, we hurried to my father's office, where he warmly welcomed us. Handing us several thick envelopes, he explained, "It's your salaries for the past months." It ended up being multiple envelopes because it couldn't all fit into one. We were stunned, unable to swallow the situation, but my father continued, "Your hard work revitalized the team. They constantly expressed their gratitude and concern for you. I couldn't possibly leave such excellent employees unpaid, and our performance has improved significantly. Thank you truly." Hearing this, we hugged each other and cried, moved by the concern shown for us. My father then added something even more wonderful. "Tom, I'm impressed with your leadership. If you're okay with my daughter, would you marry her?" Overjoyed, Tom replied tearfully, bowing to me and my father. I hugged Tom, crying alongside him, and so we got married. Continuing to work at my father's company, we lived happily every day, gradually becoming more adept at our jobs and contributing more effectively. Our time at the company was approaching a pause as I was about to take maternity leave. My father, Tom, our colleagues, and I were all looking forward to the arrival of our child.
I'm Emily, a 25-year-old who had been living a quiet, unremarkable life with my boyfriend Mike. Our relationship, which had started back in college, felt more like a familiar routine than a passionate romance. We often argued, mainly about Mike's lack of interest in planning for the future or his late-night gaming marathons, which left me to sleep alone. We were constantly skirting around the big question of our future without ever really addressing it. It wasn't that we didn't care for each other, it's just that somewhere along the way, we stopped making an effort. My parents, Sue and George, were the polar opposite of us. Married for over 30 years, they still shared loving glances and private jokes, their bond seemingly unbreakable. They were the ideal I aspired to find for myself, even if it wasn't going to be with Mike. On the evening of the crash, I remember arguing with Mike about something as trivial as unsorted laundry. He had promised to handle it, but as usual, the promise was as empty as the laundry basket was full. "Can't you just do one thing you say you're going to do?" I asked, my frustration evident. "It's just laundry. It'll get done eventually," he replied, his attention fixed on his computer screen. The argument fizzled out, as they often did, leaving the deeper issues unresolved. Later, as I sat in the back seat of my parents' car, their warmth and laughter provided a soothing balm to the residual frustration from the argument. They were celebrating another year of Mom's life, and their joy was infectious. Then, in an instant, everything changed. Headlights collided with the sound of metal on metal, and everything went black. When I woke up, the antiseptic smell of the hospital and the relentless beeping of the heart monitor were the first things I noticed. The doctor's words were clinical and detached, but the message was clear. My parents didn't survive, and my legs, once taken for granted, might never carry me again. The truth settled like a stone in my stomach. I was terrifyingly alone. Mike, who had just argued with me about laundry, was now my only connection to a life before the crash. The life where my biggest worry was whether he'd sort the whites from the colors. As the reality of my parents' absence and my potential paralysis began to sink in, a hollow despair took root. The future, once a landscape of possibilities, now felt like a barren field. The hospital room was a bubble where time moved too quickly and not at all. After what felt like an eternity of white walls and echoing silence, Mike walked in, his parents Janet and Bob a step behind him. The atmosphere was heavy with a somberness that made my heart sink even further. Mike pulled up a chair next to my bed and took my hand, his usual bravado absent. His parents stood by the door, a united front of awkward concern. "Hey, Mike began, his voice a rough whisper. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us." He paused, looking at me with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Everything that's happened, has made me realize how short life can be. I don't want to wait for the perfect moment anymore because it might never come. I want to say something, but the words seem stuck in my throat. What I'm trying to say is, will you marry me, Emily? The question hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. It was the last thing I thought I'd hear, especially now. I searched his face for the impulsive Mike I knew, but all I saw was earnestness. Janet stepped forward, her hands clasped. "We want you to be a part of our family, Emily. We'll take care of you, and it's not out of pity," Bob added quickly. "It's because we love you and want to support Mike in taking this step." I was stunned, my mind racing. This was a lifeline, unexpected and maybe even a little reckless, but a lifeline nonetheless. I looked at Mike, really looked at him, and saw not just my sometimes immature boyfriend, but a man offering support in the most uncertain time of my life. "Mike, my voice trailed off as I tried to gather my thoughts. "It's okay, Em. You don't have to decide right now. I just wanted you to know how I feel," he said, his thumb rubbing circles on the back of my hand. I thought about my parents and the unwavering love and support they had always shown me. Wasn't this what they would have wanted, for me to be loved and cared for no matter what? "Yes," I found myself saying, the words stronger than I felt. "Yes, I'll marry you." A genuine smile spread across Mike's face, the first I'd seen in days. Janet let out a soft sob, covering her mouth, and even Bob's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Moving into my parents' house with Mike should have been a fresh start, a new chapter. The house felt too big for just one person, and everywhere I looked, I saw memories of my parents. I thought Mike would fill some of those empty spaces, but I was learning quickly that his presence was more of a reminder of what was missing than a replacement. In the beginning, he was attentive, always checking on me and making sure I had everything I needed within reach. But as days turned into weeks, the attentive husband act began to wear thin. Mike started spending more time on his computer, his headphones on, shutting me out. One evening, as I maneuvered my wheelchair to the kitchen, I found him staring blankly at his screen. "Mike, have you thought about looking for a new job?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "The insurance won't cover everything, and the bills are piling up." He didn't look away from the screen. "I told you, Em, I'm taking care of you now. That's my job," Mike said, his tone resolute. "I can manage during the day." I pushed back, feeling a twinge of frustration. "You don't need to be here all the time." Finally, he turned to face me, his expression a mix of irritation and something else I couldn't quite decipher. "What do you want from me, Em? I'm here, aren't I?" I was taken aback by his tone. "Being physically here isn't the same as being present, Mike. I need a partner, not just a roommate." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile. "You know what, Em? Maybe I need more than this too. Maybe I wasn't cut out to be a nurse." His words stung, and I watched him storm out, slamming the door behind him. I was left alone in the silence of the kitchen, the weight of his words settling around me like dust. I wasn't just alone, I was lonely. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I thought about how quickly our modest honeymoon period had ended. The vows we had taken felt like they were from another lifetime. The Mike who had promised to stand by my side through sickness and health seemed like a stranger now. As the weeks dragged on, his absences grew longer and his excuses more flimsy. He was either out with friends or lost in a digital world that seemed to have no room for me. I felt like an obstacle in his life, a burden he hadn't anticipated. One particularly tough day, when the pain was bad and the house felt more like a mausoleum than a home, I heard the front door open. Expecting Mike, I called out, "Is that you?" "Yeah, it's me," he replied, his voice distant. "I'm just grabbing a few things, then I'm heading out again." I wheeled myself to the hallway and watched as he rifled through a drawer for his keys. "Going out with friends?" I asked, trying to mask the hurt in my voice. He paused, keys in hand, and sighed. I need some space, okay? It's not easy for me either." I nodded, biting back tears. "I know. I just thought we could spend some time together, like we used to." He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "Maybe when things settle down a bit, I got to go." The house felt emptier with each passing day, a vast space filled with silence and the ghosts of better times. It wasn't just Mike's absence or the void left by my parents' voices. It was the small things that started to go missing. A vase my mother loved, a silver frame holding a family photo, a painting that used to hang in the hallway. I first noticed it when I was trying to distract myself with memories. I wheeled myself into the living room, intending to look through the photo albums, but as my eyes scanned the room, they fell on the bare patch of wall where the painting had been. "Mike?" I called out, unsure when he had last gone out. There was no answer, and the emptiness of the house seemed to echo back at me. That evening, when Mike returned, I asked him, "Have you seen the landscape painting that used to be in the hallway?" He barely glanced up from his phone. "Oh, that old thing. It was getting dusty, and I figured we could use the space for something else. Something about his casual dismissal didn't sit right with me, but it was my mom's favorite, I said, a tremor of unease in my voice. He shrugged, his attention still half on his screen. We can get another painting. It's no big deal. But it was a big deal. The items that went missing next were unmistakable, things that had been in my family for years. One afternoon, I caught Janet, Mike's mom, in the act. She was bustling around the living room with a big black garbage bag. "Janet, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharp with alarm. She jumped, a guilty flush creeping up her neck. "Oh, just some spring cleaning, dear. This place is cluttered with so many old things." "But those are my things," I protested, my heart rate picking up. "Oh, we're just making things nicer for you," she said sweetly. "You'll thank us later." I watched her like a hawk every time she visited after that, but the thefts became sneakier, more calculated. And every time, the sense of violation deepened. When I brought up the missing items, I was met with reassurances that it was all in my best interest. One night, lying in bed while Mike scrolled through his phone, his new nighttime ritual, I said, "Mike, your parents have been taking things from the house." "My things?" He didn't look up. "Mom's just trying to help. You know she's got a knack for this sort of thing." "Help?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "By taking my parents' belongings." He sighed, finally setting his phone down and turning to face me. "Look, they think we should be looking forward, not backward. They're just trying to lighten your load." I wanted to scream, to rage against the violation and disrespect, but I was exhausted, tired of fighting, tired of questioning my own sanity. "This isn't what I want," I whispered, the fight draining out of me. Mike reached over and patted my hand, a gesture that felt more patronizing than comforting. "Try to get some sleep, things will look better in the morning." I couldn't take it anymore. I confided in Anna, my closest friend and a massage therapist who had been helping with my rehabilitation. Her visits were one of the rare sources of relief I had. "Anna," I said as she worked on my stiff muscles, "things are going missing around the house. And I can't shake the feeling that Mike and his parents are behind it." Anna paused, her hands stilling on my shoulders. "Have you talked to Mike about this?" "I have," I said, "but he just brushes it off, saying his parents are helping us by decluttering." Anna's brows furrowed with concern. "That doesn't sound right, Do you want me to do something? Maybe come by more often and keep an eye out." The idea sparked something in me. "Could you help me set up a camera or something to record what's going on when I'm not in the room?" Anna nodded with determination. "I'll bring something over tomorrow. We'll get to the bottom of this." True to her word, Anna returned the next day with discreet recording devices, which she placed in strategic locations around the house. It felt like something out of a spy movie, and if I weren't so desperate for the truth, I might have laughed at the absurdity of it all. A few days later, Anna came back with the recordings. We sat down to listen, and as Mike's and his parents' voices filled the room, the blood in my veins turned to ice. Their scheme unfolded through their casual conversation. "Once we get her committed, the house and everything in it will be ours," Mike's voice said, clear and cold. "Yeah, the place will sell for a fortune. And all those antiques, pure profit," his mother added, her tone greedy. "We just need to make sure Emily doesn't catch on before we have everything in place," his father chimed in. Tears streamed down my face as I listened to their betrayal. The people who had promised to care for me, to be my family, were plotting against me. Anna's hand gripped mine tightly, her voice laced with anger. "We have to do something, I wiped my eyes, the sorrow quickly giving way to a steely resolve. "We will. I'm not going to let them get away with this." The morning after listening to the recordings, I tried to act normal, but every word they said and every smile they gave felt like a lie. It was during breakfast when the full weight of their deceit settled in. I noticed something was wrong when the usual city noise that drifted through the open window was absent. I wheeled myself over to investigate, only to find that the ramps that allowed me access to the garden were gone. "Mike," I called out, panic lacing my voice. "Where are the ramps?" He came into the room, feigning ignorance. "The ramps? Oh, they were looking a bit worn. I thought they needed fixing." I stared at him, trying to process the betrayal. "And you didn't think to tell me? How am I supposed to get around?" His gaze was evasive as he shrugged. "I just thought you'd be safer inside for now, until we get new ones." The room felt like it was spinning, and it wasn't due to my injury. Safer or trapped? The words slipped out before I could stop them. He didn't respond, just turned and walked away, leaving me seething with anger and helplessness. Later, when I asked Janet about it, she was syrupy sweet with false concern. "We're just looking out for you, dear. We wouldn't want you to have an accident," she said, touching my shoulder with a faint, insincere tenderness. I pulled away from her touch, feeling the sting of their deceit. "I didn't realize needing ramps qualified as a hazard," I replied, my voice steady but my insides trembling. Janet's eyes hardened for a moment before she regained her composure. "We're just trying to help, Emily. It's for the best." That night, as I lay in bed, the darkness felt oppressive. Mike was out again, probably drowning his guilt in cheap beer and fleeting thrills. I reached for my phone, its screen a small beacon in the dark, and dialed the emergency number Anna had given me. "Anna," I whispered when she picked up. "They've removed the ramps. I'm literally trapped in my own home." Her voice was a lifeline amid the turmoil. "Hang tight, Em. I'm going to make some calls. We'll sort this out." The next day, I was in the kitchen when I heard the doorbell. My heart pounded as I maneuvered toward the entrance. It was Anna, flanked by a man and a woman in crisp suits with stern expressions. They were from a local disability rights organization here to assess my living situation. Beside them stood my lawyer, Mr. Hammond, clutching a leather briefcase. "Emily, we're here to make things right," Anna said, her determination matching the resolve in my chest. Mr. Hammond stepped forward. "We need to establish the facts first. Emily, I'll need to see the house and check against the inventory of your parents' belongings." As we moved through the house, the representatives from the service took notes, their disapproval clear at the missing ramps and the blatant disregard for my welfare. Mike walked in during the commotion, surprise etched on his face. "Em, what's going on? Who are these people?" I really looked at him, letting the full weight of my gaze settle on him. "I'm taking back control, Mike. This is my lawyer, and these are advocates for people with disabilities. They're here to ensure my home is safe and that my rights are respected." Janet and Bob entered the fray, their confusion turning to fear as they realized the seriousness of the situation. "Emily, darling, what is this about?" Janet's voice trembled. "It's about my rights, my home, and the truth," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Mr. Hammond is here to confirm the inventory of my inheritance." Mr. Hammond opened his briefcase, pulling out documents and photographs. "We have detailed records of all items bequeathed to Mrs. Harper. It seems several are missing." Bob's face paled. "Emily, I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," I replied, the recordings Anna had provided playing in my head. "And I have more than just missing items to discuss." Mike's parents exchanged glances, their facade of caring in-laws crumbling before my eyes. Mike stood there, silent, the reality of the situation dawning on him. Anna moved closer to me. "We also have evidence of the conversations you've had regarding Emily's property and well-being." The advocates from the disability service spoke up. "Removing access to the ramps is a direct violation of Mrs. Harper's rights. We'll be taking action." As Mr. Hammond laid out the evidence of their theft and their plans for my future, I saw the trap I had been in from the outside, but now the tables had turned. I was no longer the victim in their game. I was the one calling the shots. Mike finally found his voice. "Em, I can explain." I shook my head. "Save it, Mike. I've heard enough." Janet started to cry, and Bob put an arm around her, but there was no comfort to be found in their deceit. The day of the trial was a culmination of everything I had endured. The courtroom was stark, the air thick with tension. Mike and his parents were on one side, looking nothing like the family that had once promised to care for me. I was on the other, with Anna beside me and Mr. Hammond ready with his briefcase of evidence. As the proceedings began, the judge looked down at us from his bench, his gaze lingering on me for a moment. "We are here to examine the evidence regarding the allegations of theft and the premeditated exploitation of Emily Harper," he said. Mr. Hammond presented the recordings, the inventory discrepancies, and testimonies from the disability advocates. The evidence was damning, and Mike's family could do little but squirm under the weight of their deceit. Janet sobbed quietly, her sobs a soundtrack to the unraveling of their scheme. "We never meant for things to go this far," she whispered when it was her turn to speak. The judge's voice was firm as he addressed them. "You took advantage of a vulnerable person. There's no excuse for your actions." Mike stood, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry, Em. I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at him, The history we shared flashing before my eyes. Sorry, is it enough, Mike? You chose this path. The gavel came down like the final word on the life I had once known. Mike and his parents were found guilty, reparations were ordered, and they were to have no further contact with me. With Anna's support and a dedicated team, I began physical therapy. Each small movement was a victory, each step a testament to my resilience. My legs, once lifeless, began to tingle with new strength. One day, as I managed to stand with the help of parallel bars, Anna cheered me on. "Look at you, Em. You're doing it." The smile on my face was mirrored in her own. "I am, aren't I?" The joy bubbled up from a place I thought had been broken beyond repair. I moved forward, one day at a time. The house, once a mausoleum of my past life, was slowly transformed back into a home, a sanctuary where I healed and grew stronger.
Hello, I'm Ingrid, and I'm 27 years old. I was orphaned at a very young age because both my parents passed away in a car crash. They didn't have any family to look after me, so I was put into an orphanage. I was there for about 3 years before my parents adopted me. My adoptive parents turned out to be these billionaires, so I had a pretty rich and fulfilling life after that. They didn't want to make my adoption a big deal, so they kept it hushed up. They wanted to do good without it having been broadcast everywhere. When I turned into an adult and had my own place, the two of them decided that they wanted to expand their business further and took to touring Europe in search of opportunities. It was around this time that I met Patrick, my now ex-husband. We met in college and instantly liked each other. After a couple of conversations, Patrick, a very happy-go-lucky, caring man, made me like him a whole lot more. Our dates led to us becoming an official couple. We had the perfect relationship, although there was one problem. It was no secret that Patrick's family did not like me. The first time I met them, Patrick and I had just graduated college. He waited to introduce me to his parents until we were both well settled in our lives. By that, I mean that we were both working good jobs. Patrick had warned me that his parents tended to be a little judgmental when it came to their children's significant others, and he wanted me to make the best impression I could. I didn't mind, but meeting the parents was nerve-wracking for me. By the time Patrick introduced me to his parents, we had been dating for a good 4 years. In those 4 years, we also got engaged, so I guessed that, in itself, it was going to be a problem for his parents, considering they never even got to know me as his girlfriend. I remember freaking out about it with Patrick the day before we were supposed to meet his parents. "They're going to hate me, Patrick." "They won't, I promise you." "Do you not think that they'll be shocked to find out that we're engaged?" "Well, yeah, but I don't think it will be that big of a deal." "Are you being serious right now?" "You were scared about introducing me to them because you know how judgy they are. And you think introducing me as your fiancé is not going to make them judge me even more." "Look, even if they do, will what they say really matter?" "It won't to me, but I don't know about you. You always seem so careful about them." "I promise you that it won't affect or matter to me at all, Ingrid." "All right, if you say so. But do you think maybe we should just not tell them we're engaged, and then, like a month or so later, we should tell them? Will that make you feel any better about this whole thing? Because I have no problem with either of the options. I think we should hide it just in case. I'll do anything to get on that good side. You have nothing to worry about. I'll be there with you no matter what. Thanks, sweetie." The only reason I had been freaking out so much was that whenever I suggested that Patrick tell his parents about me, he would make a whole fuss about them not going to approve of me. Now, at this point, I began to kind of understand why. You see, Patrick's family were pretty rich, and they loved to live lavishly. They wanted that for their children as well, and the only way they accepted their children dating was if they also mingled with people who were as rich or even richer than them. The way I was living back then was by no means rich according to their standards. I hadn't told Patrick about my family because I didn't see the point of it. Plus, By the time I figured out why he was so adamant about not letting me introduce myself to his parents, I felt like it was even more unnecessary for them to know just who my father was. I wanted them to like me for me and not for my money. I naively believed that they would like me that way, but oh boy was I wrong. We decided to meet Patrick's parents at a fine dining restaurant. At that time, Patrick held my hand as we walked in. I wore my engagement ring on my necklace because I wanted to keep it on me without actually drawing any attention to it. When we got to our table, his parents already looked upset. Patrick told me to expect that because they were big sticklers about time. When we had arrived exactly 2 minutes late, well, we were already off to a bad start. His parents gave me a once-over and twisted their faces into disgust. They proceeded to ignore me for a little while as they made conversation with Patrick. I will admit I felt really small in their eyes. The longer they ignored my presence, the stronger my urge grew to leave. I kept my head down for the most part until finally, Patrick drew his parents' attention towards me. "Mom, Dad, you can't just keep talking to me here. This is my wonderful girlfriend, Ingrid." "Oh, hello. It's a pleasure to meet both of you." "Hi, I wish I could say the same." "Mom, what? I'm only speaking the truth. So, Ingrid, I heard you and Patrick met in college. Is that right?" "Yes, we did. We happened to share some classes together." "Ah, and how did you manage to attend this college?" "From what I know, the tuition is pretty high, and it's a pretty hard place to get into." "Dad, that is enough, Patrick. You will not speak to your father that way. He's asking a very valid question, Ingrid. Please answer him." "Well, I got a full ride there. I'm super grateful I got to go there because not only did I get to learn a lot of things, but I also got to meet Patrick, which has been one of the best things that has happened to me. Of course, it's one of the best things that's happened to you. He's loaded, and you need that kind of money. At least you have some brains because your looks aren't all that good. You know what? That's enough. We're leaving." "Come on, Ingrid." Patrick grabbed my hand, and we walked out. I was in shock at the way that his parents had treated me. I couldn't believe that people could be so mean so openly and to the person's face. I was in too much shock to even feel anything. The car ride back home was silent because Patrick was fuming. When we reached home, Patrick made it a point to make sure that I was doing okay. But truthfully, at the moment, I really did not know how to feel. I had dressed up nicely and made sure that I sat properly as well. I didn't order anything expensive, but somehow, without me even saying a word, Paula and Marley made their judgment about me. Patrick didn't speak to his parents for a while after that. They texted him and told him that we had been very disrespectful by walking out on them during lunch. Patrick didn't respond to that and only texted them about a month later to tell them that he had gotten engaged. His parents weren't too happy about it, but Patrick threatened them with no contact if they said or did anything against me. They offered to pay for our wedding on the condition that they got to make all the decisions regarding it. Obviously, neither Patrick nor I wanted that, so we decided to do the next best thing, elope. My parents were in Europe, and they knew about me eloping. They were just happy that I was happy. And they did send Patrick and me a gift. Patrick did raise his brows at how they sent us a pretty expensive painting as a gift. But I just brushed it off as them having enough money to spend it on that. After getting married, we next met Paula and Marley at a party that they had hosted. They invited us to celebrate their anniversary. Truth be told, I was actually pretty happy that they had invited me despite the dislike they held for me. When we got there, I was ignored by everyone. If you think being ignored by 2 people was embarrassing, being ignored by about 30 people was even worse. I hung by Patrick's side for the most part, but nobody even tried to talk to me. If I ever did try to speak and make conversation, people would just either look me up and down and walk away, or they would continue talking to Patrick as if I never said anything. By the end of the night, I was in tears. I was humiliated and downright disgusted by the behavior that everyone was showing. The crowd had asked Paula and Marley to make a speech at the end of the night, and they got up to make one. By this time, I was tired and I wanted to go home, but in their speech, They began by talking about how grateful they were to have almost everyone in the room in their lives. That was only the first jab that they threw at me. They kept making many more, which the guests kept laughing at. At some point, I just got up and walked out. I ordered an Uber and went back home. I cried the entire way back home and up until Patrick got back home. When he got back, he seemed upset and angry. "Why did you walk out like that? Do you know how embarrassing that was for me?" "What? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me right now, Ingrid. I had to endure my parents yelling at me and a lot of the guests pitying me for being with you. Are you serious? What about how embarrassing it was for me?" "Oh, come on, Ingrid. You could deal with it for one night. It was my parents' anniversary, for God's sake. I was ignored by everyone, and your parents chose to make even more fun of me in their toast. How do you possibly expect me to be okay with something like that? I'm not saying what they did was right, but you could have just lived through it. I would have spoken to them about it after. What would that have done for me? I don't like being put in positions where I'm only being humiliated. Everyone was laughing at me. You've never been in that position before, so it's easy for you to talk about this like it's no big deal. My parents expect an apology from you. I want one too. I'm afraid that I won't be doing that. I'll only do that if they give me one too. As for your apology, I see no reason for apologizing to you. You always stood up for me. I don't see why this is any different. This is very different because, unlike before, you humiliated my family in front of all our guests, and your parents humiliated me, your wife, in front of all their guests. Maybe my parents were right about you. You're impossible." With that, Patrick went to sleep in the guest bedroom. I couldn't understand why he had a sudden change of behavior. Was it really that bad for him after I walked out? He was always the first person to stand up for me, especially considering the fact that I was usually bored with whatever his parents had to say about me. For me to walk out should have been the biggest signifier of just how bad they made me feel. Yet Patrick didn't seem to care about that. Patrick didn't talk to me for the next week. I also got a lot of texts from his parents, calling me ungrateful and an embarrassment. I tried to talk to Patrick, but he refused to. Eventually, I decided to give in and apologize to both him and his parents. Even that felt humiliating, but I was willing to go through it because I loved Patrick, and I didn't want this to be the hill I died on. Things after that only got worse for me. Patrick's parents retired and spent a lot of their time hosting family dinners. They hosted it once a week, and Patrick was always invited. The first time they hosted it, Patrick brought me along with him to their house. As soon as I stepped in, the atmosphere in the room got awkward. Paula was busy getting ready, so she didn't see me immediately, but Marley and the rest of Patrick's siblings awkwardly glanced at me. They didn't talk to me, and Patrick left me to stand by myself while he caught up with the rest of his family. When Paula came downstairs, she saw me and practically flew over to me in rage. "What are you doing here?" "Excuse me?" "No, I will not excuse you. What are you doing in my house right now?" "Well, you invited us for dinner." "Wrong. I invited Patrick because it's a family dinner. I'm Patrick's wife, so I'm a part of this family, am I not?" "Absolutely not. An orphan like you deserves no space in this family." "What? You thought you could hide the detail from us. We do background checks on our children's spouses, and you are not in my son's league whatsoever. I will never accept you here." "Why not? That can't be the only thing that determines whether I get to be a part of your family. You're ugly and poor. You'd never fit into our elite circles. I never want to see you again." "Why are you being so superficial? Are you scared that I'll damage your reputation just by existing? Does the fact that I bring your son happiness not satisfy you? If happiness brought in money, a lot of people would be billionaires. This is exactly why you'd never fit in with us. Or maybe I'll just never be as superficial as the rest of you because I value who a person actually is. You never even took the chance to get to know me before casting your judgments on me. I'm glad I don't fit in with you, Ingrid. That's enough. Here's some money. Get yourself an Uber and leave." I stared at Patrick in shock as he held out the money. He shoved the money in my hands, and turned back around towards his mother. She smirked at me. I felt tears spring into my eyes as I turned back around and walked out. I was once again crying in the Uber. I didn't understand why Patrick had changed so drastically. Was this his way of making up to his parents after the party? Whatever it was, I was hurt and angry at him. He was okay with his parents using my past as an insult and defending them instead of me, like he usually did. I wanted to yell and scream, but I knew that would only project a worse image of me and prove them right, which is why I walked away. I tried to think if anything I said was out of line, but I really did not see anything wrong. I was merely standing up for myself, calmly might I add. After Patrick came back home, he went back to not talking to me. My heart was breaking, and I felt so alone. I knew that he expected another apology, but I couldn't bring myself to do it like the last time. Paula had blatantly insulted me in the worst way, and Patrick was angry at me for it. If anything, I expected an apology from him. For the next 2 weeks, Patrick and I didn't speak to each other. It was hard at first, but I got used to it. Eventually, the dinners his family hosted still happened, and about once a week, I was all alone at home, which I truthfully did not mind. On one of those nights, my parents video called me. "Hey, honey. Hey, sweetie. How's it going? Hey, Dad. Hey, Mom. Things are not good. Why? What's wrong, sweetie? If you need help with anything, feel free to ask us. I don't think this is something you guys would be able to help me out with, but thanks for the offer. Where's Patrick? Is he not helping? That's the thing. He's part of the problem." Huh? Sweetie, could you be a little more clear about what the problem is? Well, his parents are pretty wealthy and also very snobby. Oh, I hate those kinds of people. Tell me about it. Anyways, they thought that I was some poor girl who could never live up to their standards and fit into their elite circles. So they took it upon themselves to humiliate me every time that I met them. What the hell? Oh yeah, and the last time I went over, Patrick's mom decided calling me an orphan was a good insult. Oh, that woman. I'm going to claw her face off. How dare she call my precious child an orphan? Do they not know about us? And what the hell has Patrick been doing in all this? I didn't tell them about you guys because I knew that their opinion of me would change if they knew. And I wanted them to like me for who I was and not for my wealth. As for Patrick, he's siding with them. He thinks that I was disrespectful when I stood up for myself. Honey, are you sure this is the man you want to be with? I love him a lot, but this is not how I want it to be. We haven't been speaking to each other for the last 2 weeks, and I'm surprisingly okay with that. All right, sweetie. I'll get you in touch with one of my friends over there. As for your worry about us not being able to help you out, I think we might actually be able to help you get a little sweet revenge. Huh? What do you mean? Your dad and I are coming there next week. We wanted to take you and Patrick on a vacation, but now we can just take you. More things for us to do together, I guess. Really? Oh my God, I'm so excited to finally get to see the two of you in person. Again, that was a real pick-me-up. Finally, I felt happy after so long. The three of us continued to talk for a little while after that. Dad elaborated on his plan to help me. After a little while, he asked me where these dinners of theirs were being held. And as far as I knew, they took turns hosting in their house and at restaurants. Conveniently, the week that my parents were coming, the dinner was going to happen in a restaurant. I needed to get information on where exactly this dinner was going to be held, so I could provide my parents with the location. Thankfully, I had Patrick's email logged into my phone. And if there was one thing I knew about Paula and Marley, it was that they loved to email everyone everything. It wasn't that hard to get the location, and I gave it to my parents. At the same time, my mom's lawyer friend contacted me, and we got started on the process of filing for divorce. My parents landed in the States and decided to check into their hotel, where I met them. We had lunch together, and then the two of them sent me on my way for a spa day that they entirely paid for because they thought I deserved it while they got ready to get revenge on my in-laws. My parents walked into the restaurant that Patrick and his family were at. According to Dad, when they approached the table, Marley and Paula began to murmur among themselves as they recognized just who he was. Mom told me that this was how the conversation went. "Hello? Oh my gosh, Mr. Burns. What brings you here? Oh wow, I just happened to see some familiar faces, and I figured that I could drop in and probably dine with you." Familiar faces? Who are you speaking about, Mr. Burns? Well, I see Patrick. Me? Well, hello. A pleasure to meet you. You, my daughter, has spoken a lot about you. But speaking of my daughter, where is she? Your daughter? I'm afraid you're mistaken. I don't think she's here, but she should be, right? I'm sorry, Mr. Burns, but we didn't even know that you had a daughter. Of course I do. And she's married to Patrick. What? I'm sorry, but I think you're mistaken. Yes, his wife's name is Ingrid, and she was an orphan. Yes, I do know that, and that is why we adopted her. Excuse me? You're her dad? Yes, and from what I see, she isn't here. She's been telling me that there has been some problems with her in-laws, but I see what the problem was. It was you. No, she was the one who hid this huge thing from us. If we knew, you would have treated her better. She didn't want you to treat her nicely because of her background. Oh well, she did ask me to hand this over to Patrick. My dad handed Patrick the divorce papers and walked out. After that, it only took a couple of phone calls for a lot of investors to pull away from Marley's business. They were quickly crashing, and nothing was more satisfying than watching them crumble down to the levels that they made fun of. I got a lot of texts from all Patrick's family, calling me a bunch of nasty names while some of them begged me to talk to my dad and reverse what he had done. Patrick thankfully signed the divorce papers without any hassle. My parents and I went on a long vacation after that. I had the time of my life, and I slowly began to heal. Yeah, it hurt that I had lost the love of my life, but I also learned just how important it is to stand up for myself. I'm forever grateful to my parents for everything they've done for me, and I can't wait to see what else life has to offer me.
On the other side of this heavy door, I can only imagine what they're thinking. Perhaps they're questioning my sanity, feeling quite unsettled by my absence. But their concerns are lost on me, and I have no interest in seeking their approval. With a cheerful grin, I waved at the trio of anxious figures beyond the door and called out, "Good luck making your way back safely." My name is Karen, a 32-year-old newlywed. Not long ago, my husband and I celebrated our first anniversary, and while we haven't started a family yet, I cherish this chapter of our lives. Before tying the knot, I adored embarking on solo day trips by train whenever I had a free day. My friends often asked if I didn't feel lonely traveling alone, but I discovered a unique joy in wandering at my own pace, free from a strict itinerary. Though there was a hint of solitude, the thrill of exploration always outweighed it. I have a beloved travel magazine that I sometimes turn to for inspiration on my adventures. As my routine unfolded, I began to notice a curious coincidence. Wasn't that the same man I saw last week? It happened so frequently that one might call it fate, if they believed in such things. At first, it was a little unsettling, but it turned out he felt the same way. One day, he approached me hesitantly, saying, I'm sorry if I'm mistaken, but haven't we met before in different places?" To break the awkwardness, I showed him my travel magazine and confidently explained that I was following one of its suggested trips. To my surprise, he revealed that he had the same magazine and smiled broadly. That's how I met Mason, my future husband. He was captivating with a carefree approach to travel, always packing light for his journeys while I tended to over-prepare. He joked, "With everything going cashless now, all you need is a mobile phone." Our conversation sparkled with excitement as we discovered our shared passion for travel. We exchanged contact details, and our solo trips gradually transformed into joint adventures. I delighted in the fact that sharing experiences made them even more memorable, and local delicacies tasted better when enjoyed with someone special. After about 8 months of dating, Mason proposed, and I couldn't have been happier. Just 8 months into our relationship, we made the joyful decision to marry, embarking on what I thought would be a blissful new chapter in our lives. However, this happiness was soon overshadowed by the presence of Mason's parents, Austin and Janet, who lived just a 25-minute drive away, both in their 50s, with Janet working part-time while they remained active in the workforce. They initially visited our home quite often. However, over time, we found a comfortable balance with fewer visits. Our post-wedding life included regular trips to various tourist spots, continuing a tradition we both loved. Recently, Mason embraced a minimalist lifestyle, carrying only his mobile phone and leaving his wallet with me. "It feels so light. I hardly look ready to go out, do I?" he joked with a satisfied grin. I silently wished he would at least carry his wallet, but it was a minor inconvenience. Then one ordinary day took an unexpected turn when Mason casually suggested, "By the way, my parents' wedding anniversary is coming up. How about we invite them on our next trip?" I felt a sudden tightness in my chest at the suggestion, but I forced a smile and replied, "Yes, that sounds great. We haven't seen Janet and Austin recently anyway." Mason, oblivious to my discomfort, didn't notice the strain in my expression. The next day, when I called his parents to extend the invitation, they were thrilled. "I guess I have to give it my best shot," I thought, bracing myself. Honestly, I find it challenging to be around my in-laws. They aren't unpleasant people. We just don't seem to mesh well. I'm quite reserved and prefer calm environments, while they are the epitome of high energy, which can be overwhelming for me. The first time I met them, their boisterous enthusiasm took me by surprise. "Nice to meet you. I'm Mason's mom, and this is his dad," they declared with the gusto of stand-up comedians, causing me to tense up involuntarily. Later, when the four of us, Mason, his parents, and I, went out for dinner, they chose the restaurant. I wondered if it was one of their favorite spots, given their enthusiastic choice. When we arrived, I was greeted by the sight of an all-you-can-eat buffet. The idea of meeting their son's girlfriend for the first time in such an informal setting made me chuckle to myself. "We've been so anxious today that we haven't eaten anything since this morning," Janet exclaimed, her beaming smile seemingly immune to any nerves. "That's right, we need to get our money's worth," Austin chimed in, revealing the true reason behind their skipped breakfast. Their loud voices drew discreet chuckles from other diners, making me feel a bit embarrassed and eager to leave. I glanced around, hoping Mason shared my discomfort, but to my surprise, he had already headed off to get food. Not to be outdone, his parents also jumped up, ready to load their plates as if preparing for a long winter's hibernation. Watching them, I couldn't help but wonder, can I really become a part of this family? I managed only a strained smile amid their boisterous energy, finding myself barely able to touch my food as I wrestled with doubts about my future with Mason. However, my apprehensions softened a bit when they affectionately remarked at the end of our meal, "What a wonderful girlfriend Mason has. He may be a bit awkward, but please take good care of him, Karen." Their sincere words warmed my heart. I loved Mason, and despite their overwhelming nature, I believed his parents meant well. When Mason proposed a few months later, I accepted without hesitation, convinced of our bond. Yet it turned out I wasn't as skilled at reading people as I thought. At our wedding, Mason's parents seemed to overlook the solemnity of the ceremony. Their attention instead focused on the buffet, much to my own parents' dismay. Mason's brother Brian appeared to be the only one aware of the awkwardness. "I'm sorry my parents showed such an embarrassing side," he confessed, his face flushed. "It's really shameful." I learned from Brian that he lives alone and has a somewhat strained relationship with our in-laws. They once complained, "That boy is always so noisy with his complaints." Just recently, he had boasted about buying several eggs despite a one-per-person limit, to which I had scolded him. "Annoy," he retorted. "Don't you feel guilty about benefiting yourself at the expense of others?" Hearing that made me realize the complexities of our new family dynamics. I couldn't help but wonder, isn't that a fair point? What's wrong with expecting a little consideration? My thoughts were stirred by a recent visit from my in-laws, Janet and Austin, to our new home. They arrived empty-handed, which wasn't an issue, but soon began rummaging through our shelves. "Isn't this the snack they're advertising on TV? I've been dying to try it. Oh, and this one too." They treated my carefully chosen snacks as though they were on a scavenger hunt. Mason, ever so nonchalant, told them, "If you want them, take them home." "That's fine, right, Karen?" I wanted to express my frustration right then and there, but all I managed was a forced smile. It was becoming clear that my in-laws were quite the moochers, their constant casualness wearing me down. The demands of "I want this" and "give me that" wore me down in the early days of our marriage. They visited weekly, and each encounter left me feeling increasingly on edge. One day, I finally couldn't hold back my irritation any longer. "Mason, don't you think there's something off about Janet and Austin? They're kind of overbearing." My frustration boiled over into a full-blown argument, and Mason seemed genuinely perplexed by my anger. "No, not really. They've always been like this. Don't worry about it," he said, patting my shoulder. That only fueled my irritation further. "You kidding me? If this keeps up, I'll consider a divorce." My raised voice alarmed Mason, and he quickly intervened to put a stop to his parents' intrusive visits. Whatever he said to them worked, because our home life returned to a semblance of peace. However, the thought of traveling with them still made me anxious. On the day of the trip, I was taken aback to see them waiting, seemingly ready. "It's been a while. I heard you've been busy with work. It must be tough," Janet said, trying to make conversation. Despite her words, I was far from calm, especially when I noticed something odd. Janet and Austin, where's your luggage?" On closer inspection, I realized they hadn't brought anything with them, not even for a day trip. "Isn't it normal to bring at least a bag?" I asked. "We wanted to be ready to move quickly," they explained, leaving me bewildered and bracing for whatever might come next. As I complained about a sore shoulder, the response felt all too familiar and only added to my confusion. The trip unfolded just as disastrously as I had feared. Soon, it became clear that my in-laws had conveniently forgotten their wallets, feeding surprise with a casual, "That's strange, isn't it?" I watched them play innocent, and my unease deepened. I found myself contemplating whether it would be better to cut the trip short or cancel it altogether. Unfortunately, my concerns fell on deaf ears. An exasperated Mason reassured me, "My folks have always been like this. I'll cover for them, but I'll make sure they pay me back." It seemed the trip would proceed as his parents laughed and offered hollow apologies. All I felt was disgust. Even after we arrived at our destination, their rudeness continued. At a store, they complained loudly about the lack of free samples, exclaiming, "Wow, stingy, huh?" When I bought a drink and hadn't even taken a sip, Janet asked, "Can I have a sip? I'm thirsty too. I can't believe I forgot my wallet." I forced a smile as Mason finally intervened, saying, "Stop it, it's embarrassing. Look, I'll buy you one." Overhearing this, Austin muttered under his breath, "What a stingy woman." I bristled at his lack of compassion, thinking bitterly, I could say the same about you. I should have walked away then, but my stubbornness kept me there. The pattern repeated itself 2 more times. After seemingly enjoying our first trip, Janet contacted Mason to plan another. When I saw them at the station platform again, a chill ran down my spine. This time, they remembered their wallets. But when it came time to pay, Austin exclaimed, "Oh no, this is the wallet I used before." I rushed out in such a hurry. Their blatant lie was something only Mason seemed willing to believe. On the 3rd trip, they forgot their wallets again. By then, it was clear their forgetfulness was intentional. I confronted Janet directly, asking, "Excuse me, but did you deliberately forget your wallet? You never intended to pay, did you?" My accusation made her face flush with anger, and Austin snapped back, "What a rude woman." Apologized to Janet. Fueled by long-held frustration, I stood my ground. "No way, both of you are just too greedy." Caught in the heated exchange, Mason appeared at a loss while curious tourists around us began to watch the spectacle. Noticing their gazes, Mason felt embarrassed and finally pleaded, "Stop it, please." Overwhelmed by the entire ordeal, I broke down in tears, feeling utterly disillusioned. As the confrontation reached its peak, the in-laws' reaction took an unexpected turn. Janet rushed over to a tearful Mason and, with Austin silently by her side, said, "I'm sorry, Mason. It was my fault. You're so kind to cry for me." I stood there, bewildered by their melodramatic response, my mind racing with one clear thought. This is impossible. All I could think was that I wanted a divorce as I watched tears stream down Mason's cheeks. Sensing the gravity of the situation, his parents lost their previously combative demeanor. "Karen, we know we're often in the wrong," they admitted. "It's Mason's money, but we've still taken advantage of him." Their repetition of "it's Mason's money" dripped with a sarcasm that revealed their lack of genuine remorse, confirming my suspicions that their forgetfulness about their wallets was intentional. Janet casually referred to Mason's money, oblivious to the fact that Mason and I both contributed to our finances. His salary was only slightly higher than mine, making our incomes nearly equal. Every outing with the in-laws recently had ended with them wanting something. I want to buy this too. Maybe some gifts for the neighbors as well. What's that? Looks tasty. Hey Mason, buy that for me. Their endless demands had racked up shockingly high bills on Mason's credit card, and we had been living primarily off my salary for the past few months. At the time of our marriage, I had viewed our finances as shared, believing in spending within our means and not burdening each other. What infuriated me the most was Mason's reliance on cash during our travels. What? Only cash here? He exclaimed, pulling out his nearly empty wallet from my bag, which contained just a few coins. No, I messed up. You know I don't carry cash, he said, devoid of malice. This still injured me, especially since I always covered my expenses. I couldn't help but feel that his parents thought I was freeloading off Mason's income while simply complaining. We split our living expenses, so their accusations were not only unfounded but deeply unpleasant. As I watched Mason cry, with Austin attempting to console him, I had a moment of introspection. I'm sorry for being presumptuous, I finally said, deciding to diffuse the tension. You guys go ahead on the train. I'll buy some drinks. Though reluctant, this decision was my attempt to restore some temporary peace. With a serene smile, I watched as Mason and the in-laws boarded the train. Their expressions shifted from happiness to panic when they realized I wasn't following. Sensing something amiss, Mason texted me, Karen, are you coming? The train is about to leave. As the train doors began to close, I could see the panic etched on Mason's face. He seemed to be shouting something, but I was busy replying to his message. I'm divorcing you. If your parents are so important to you, then live happily with them. Goodbye. I turned my back on Mason's frantic calls and texts, contemplating whether he even recognized the chaos he was causing on the train. Through the closing doors, his expression shifted from confusion to anger. Hey, open this door. Are you crazy? I won't forgive you, he shouted, as if I needed his approval. I could see his parents yelling too, but their voices were drowned out in the noise of the train. Smiling at the bewildered trio, I muttered to myself, let's see if you make it back safely. Good luck. The train pulled away swiftly, vanishing from sight. As it departed, I felt a mix of relief and defiance. Knowing the next stop was quite a distance away, I hurried home to pack my things. I decided to stay with a friend while I figured out my next steps. Meanwhile, the barrage of messages from Mason continued until they abruptly stopped. His phone likely died. He often forgot to charge it overnight, and just that morning he mentioned it was at only 30%. Portable battery chargers are essential, he often said. Ironically, his essential charger was in my bag, along with his wallet. As I discussed my situation with my friend, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Brian, Mason's brother. Karen, I'm sorry. Did something happen? He asked. Brian explained that Mason's phone had run out of battery, and in his panic, he had dropped it, shattering the screen. Unable to contact me, the desperate in-laws turned to Brian. Instead of probing, he listened as I recounted everything about Mason and his parents, speaking without restraint. I could hear Brian's tone sharpen as I spoke. In the background, I caught snippets of the in-laws insisting that Brian, known for his articulate nature, would surely outmaneuver me in this argument. After I finished, Brian snapped, his voice taking on an authoritative edge. Hey, you scoundrel. Are you stupid? When Brian grew truly angry, his imposing demeanor surfaced. As the voice of reason, his words carried weight, and the in-laws' loud bickering echoed in the background. Choosing that moment, I quietly ended the call. Though Mason had initially been unsettled by the idea of divorce, my firm stance communicated through a lawyer led him to reluctantly accept the separation. Later, Brian confided that the in-laws had a notorious reputation, disliked not only by neighbors but also by those they had known in school. When Mason moved back to his parents' house, he quickly became the subject of local gossip, and now all three of them seldom ventured outside. Mason's colleagues, unsure how to address the rapid divorce, began to treat him cautiously as if he were a sensitive topic. Finding some humor in the situation, Brian shared that the in-laws were infamous even at the local supermarket for their shameless antics, such as demanding discounts on nearly expired items or asking for freebies due to minor damages. He expressed his long-standing embarrassment and disdain for their behavior, noting that their actions were influenced by a gambling addiction, which explained their constant search for bargains and seemingly insatiable hunger. When people asked me about the reason for my divorce, I simply mentioned a fundamental difference in values. Tolerating such behavior would require an extraordinarily broad-minded person, something I realized I could not be. Since the divorce, I've continued my work and even taken on a side job as a freelance writer, inspired by the success of my travel blog, which caught the attention of a publisher. My passion for travel has seamlessly blended with my new writing assignments, and I've discovered that traveling solo suits me best. Last month, my writing earned me a decent income, enabling me to plan a vacation to a distant resort for some much-needed relaxation. At just 32 years old, I feel like my life is truly just beginning, filled with new possibilities and free from the turmoil that once clouded my happiness.
Checking my phone, I discovered 13 missed calls, all from my mother-in-law, Martha. Not again, I thought. As I pondered this, my phone vibrated once more. I answered, and Martha's voice, filled with anger, came through. "Excuse me, isn't the allowance for this month $3,000 due?" she demanded. "Excuse me," I retorted. "I'll send the allowance once this month's payment is deposited." Martha raged, completely disregarding my circumstances and only expressing her own desires. I had enough of her. Even in this situation, she didn't reflect on her words and actions. I felt I had no choice but to resort to my last option. I pulled myself together and bled out to my phone. "Your son has passed away, so I can no longer send the allowance. My name is Jennifer Smith, 32 years old. I'm a busy working woman at a major financial firm and also a housewife." I continued, "I got married about 2 years ago. I met my beloved husband Mark through our shared hobbies. He was kind to everyone, and I was attracted to his warm smile, quickly developing feelings for him. Apparently, he felt the same way, and after dating for a year, we immediately got engaged. We both believed that we wouldn't meet anyone better than each other. We were living together while dating, and without any major quarrels, we decided to marry. Everything went smoothly for us, but here's where a problem arose. Martha, my mother-in-law. My father-in-law had passed away a few years ago, and since Mark didn't have any siblings, his only family was Martha. The trouble started when I first visited her home to introduce myself before our wedding. "Nice to meet you, Martha," I said, trying to be polite. She clearly showed a displeased expression. "So, you're Mark's fan, huh?" she said. "Yes, my name is Jennifer Miller." "You're a rather plain girl. I wonder what Mark sees in you," she remarked. I couldn't tell if she was joking or seriously meant what she said. Having such words directed at me by the mother of my loved one, I was quite shocked. Seeing my state, Mark frowned at Martha. "Hey, Mom, what's with the sudden harsh words? How can you say such things to the person I chose?" Mark questioned. "No, Mark. I'm just trying to choose a suitable woman for you," she replied. "Choose? I'm the one who chose her. You have no right to meddle. Don't say it in such a cold way. I'm just telling the truth because I care about you. If you were really thinking of me, you'd simply support us. Why can't you understand such a simple thing?" The air turned heavy as an argument unfolded between mother and son right before my eyes. Given that this was my first meeting with Martha, I wasn't in a position to intervene. Although the atmosphere remained awkward, we ultimately managed to express our intent to marry. As we were leaving, Martha called out to Mark, sounding somewhat disgruntled. "Mark, can I have a word? You're going to keep that promise after you get married, right?" "What promise?" Mark inquired. "You know about the allowance or that?" "Yes, I'll be sure to take care of that. Can we not discuss it here, please?" Mark seemed uncomfortable, and the atmosphere between my husband and his mother was tense, thick with discomfort in the car on the way home. I approached Mark to address the lingering concern that had been bothering me. "Hey, Mark, about the conversation you had with your mom as we were leaving," I began. Mark sighed deeply and began to speak slowly. "Yeah, I should have told you about it, Jennifer. I heard something about an allowance after my dad passed away. I've been sending money to my mom every month. How much? I asked. $22,000. $2,000? I couldn't help but raise my voice in surprise. Mark continued, "Actually, my mom has a debt. She lost a lot of money at a casino a long time ago. She's still paying it off, and because her health isn't great these days, she spends a lot of time at home. But she still needs money to live on." $2,000? Isn't that a bit too much? I questioned. If I try to lower the amount, she keeps calling me over and over, and no matter what, a mother is still a mother. I worry about her living alone. I understood that Mark was devoted to his mother. However, 2 months after our wedding, during my lunch break one day, I received a phone call from Martha. When I answered, she began to speak in a cheerful tone. "Jennifer, long time no see. Can we chat for a bit?" I hesitated before replying, "Yes, what can I do for you?" "You could start sending me money," she said. I was so taken aback that I couldn't find the words to respond. However, Martha seemed excited to continue the conversation. "You mentioned before that you're working for a financial company, right? That means you have a good salary, doesn't it?" she inquired. "Well, not exactly," I replied, avoiding eye contact. "Are you lying to avoid giving me money?" Martha's tone turned accusatory. "That's not what I mean," I explained. "But Martha, you're still receiving financial support from Mark, aren't you?" In response to my question, Martha defiantly replied, "So what?" I stated what I felt. "Martha, receiving $2,000 in monthly support is a big deal, and yet you're asking for more, really?" Martha questioned, "If you were to send me an additional $1,000, I could avoid burdening Mark." Confused, I asked, "What do you mean by that?" Martha elaborated, "Well, I have Mark as a guarantor for my debts. If I fail to make payments, the debt collectors will go after him. Do you understand?" "But aren't you using part of Mark's $2,000 to pay back the debt?" I inquired. Martha admitted, "I'm short. I haven't told Mark, but I have a significant amount of debt." From Martha's tone, it was apparent that this was a fact even her husband was unaware of. Having children in the future would increase our expenses. Additionally, taking over Martha's debt was not an easy task. If Martha's payments fell behind and the debt fell onto Mark, the interest would likely have accumulated significantly by that time. If I refused to send money, it would eventually become a problem for my husband as well. It was better for Martha to pay off her debt now. Thinking along those lines, I reluctantly agreed to Martha's proposal. "All right, I'll start sending you money," I conceded. Martha seemed relieved, saying, "Really good, Jennifer. I knew you would say that. The total, with Mark's contribution, will be $3,000. But this means you can pay off your debt, right?" "Yes, of course." "I should be able to pay it all off in about a year," Martha assured. I pressed, "You promise, right? You'll make sure to pay off all your debts." Martha agreed, and I said, "I get it, so I'll be expecting it from this month onwards." She ended the call abruptly. Physical exhaustion from work, combined with this emotional burden, only added to my stress. $1,000 a month was going to be rough, but it was also to prevent future problems for us. After all, if Martha couldn't make a living, it would upset Mark as well. That night, I promptly reported the matter to my husband. He listened attentively and said I didn't have to do this, but I had already given my word to Martha, and it was a decision made for our future well-being. Mark expressed his gratitude and understanding, even as he maintained a sorry expression throughout. Time flew by, and 2 years had passed since then. The financial aid we thought would end in a year was still ongoing, and even now, we were transferring $3,000 every month to Martha. What's more, about 2 months ago, Mark fell ill and has been unable to go to work. He's on sick leave, so he's receiving disability benefits, but it's a mere pittance compared to his previous salary. Last month, I managed to transfer $3,000 to Martha from my savings, but it would be very challenging if this situation continues. Unbelievably, Martha has not once come to visit her sick son. We have told her about his hospitalization, but she doesn't show up to see him and only contacts me to ask, "You're still sending the money, right?" I was so angry that I decided to confront Mark about the issue. "Mark, don't you think it's wrong that Martha is only concerned about money, even though you're in such a state? We need to think seriously about what to do going forward," I said. Mark agreed, saying, "Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. I don't want to put more strain on you, Jennifer. This month, too, she's been bombarding me with calls and messages, asking if we sent the money yet. Are you serious? How can she only think about money when her own son is sick?" Mark showed his anger at his mother, his face slightly tense. Then, as if he had an idea, Mark exclaimed, "That's it," and wore a sly grin. "What is it, Mark?" I asked. "Well, this is our last resort. I've come up with something good for my mom," Mark suggested. What Mark proposed was a plan I could never have imagined. Although it could be called inappropriate, it seemed to be the only way to make Martha understand. A few weeks later, Mark was discharged from the hospital. Martha didn't reply to any of our messages, so we didn't tell her about Mark's discharge in the last 2 weeks. Martha's relentless demands for money had reached a point of absurdity. It seemed pointless to continue sending funds to a mother who showed no concern for her son. While Mark and I were enjoying a cup of tea, my phone buzzed with a message. Upon checking, I found 13 missed calls from Martha. As I pondered this, my phone vibrated again, signaling another call from her. "Hello," I answered, turning on the speaker microphone so that Mark could hear. Martha started shouting immediately. "Listen, where's the $33,000 for this month?" "Excuse me, that's right. The money for this month hasn't been transferred yet," I replied. I began to explain Mark's situation, but she interrupted, showing no empathy. "I don't care if he's in the hospital or whatever. It's none of my business. You're working at a good place, right? You must have plenty of savings. Hurry up and transfer it here," Martha shouted angrily. Incredibly, she went on to say something outrageous. "Listen, since you married Mark, if you can't pay, you have to pay me. Understand? If you refuse, I'll make you the guarantor. Got it?" At that moment, something inside me snapped. She was openly displaying her desires without considering our situation at all. I had reached my breaking point. I firmly declare into my smartphone, "Mark has passed away. I can't send you any more money." At these words, Martha blurted out, baffled, "What?" Yes, this was the last resort that my husband suggested, to lie to Martha about Mark's death and observe her reaction. If she showed any sign of sadness, if she reflected on her behavior and apologized, we would continue to support her financially. But if she didn't reflect, if she demanded money, we would cut ties completely. Deep down, I thought that even a money-grubbing woman like Martha would deeply reflect on her actions if she were told that her own son had died. However, the very next moment, Martha burst into loud laughter. "Yay, what's so funny?" I asked. "Well, isn't it obvious? If Mark is dead, that means his inheritance will be distributed to me too. Excuse me, I've been looking into it since I heard that Mark was sick. Listen here, 2/3 of Mark's assets are yours, but 1/3 is mine." I was at a loss for words. I never thought that when she first heard her son was sick, she wouldn't look into treatment, but rather into how the inheritance would be divided. My anger surpassed. I was simply dumbfounded, and my husband appeared to feel the same way. As our eyes met, he slowly nodded, signaling to continue with the plan. I once again addressed Martha in a strong tone. "Martha, did you hear what I said? Mark is dead." "I heard. What about it? Aren't you sad your own son passed away before you?" She callously responded, "You just make sure to send me. I won't let you get away with not doing it," I exclaimed. However, with a click, the phone line was abruptly cut off, and a dial tone echoed. Glancing at my husband, I saw that he was visibly shaking with a face red with anger. "Mark, are you okay?" I asked. My husband looked into my eyes and said, "I'm cutting ties with her." She'll likely come here eventually, demanding my money. Let's wait until then, okay? But are you really okay with this? Cutting off ties just like that? I inquired. Yeah, I have no regrets. After that call, she's no mother, my husband replied, his eyes filled with hatred, and I felt the same way. A person who only thinks about money over her own son's life is not family to me. A few days later, as we expected, Martha came to our house. For the time being, I decided to hide my husband in the next room and deal with Martha myself. She approached me with a face like a demon. Hey, give me Mark's inheritance right now, she demanded again. With that, anything else to say? He's already dead, isn't he? It's pointless to say anything now, I retorted. Yet you never even visited him. What are you saying? Are you really his mother? You're so annoying. Give me the inheritance right away. I don't mind dating a lawyer, Martha persisted. Speaking more would be a waste of time, I thought. Just as I thought that, my husband emerged from the next room. Seeing him, Martha let out a startled gasp, as if she had seen a ghost. Mama. Mark said, "Why are you dead? Long time no, Mom, sorry, but the news about my death was a lie," Mark explained. A lie? How could you be so disrespectful? Martha responded. I wanted to confirm your true nature, Mom. I was curious about how you'd handle the allowance if your son died. But you turned out to be a gold digger, just as I suspected. I got that perfectly, I added. What? How dare you call your mother a gold digger? Martha protested. Silence. I'm cutting ties with a toxic parent like you, Mark shouted. Martha's mouth was agape at my husband's angry shouts. She could not come to terms with the fact that her own son was severing ties with her. What? What does this mean, Mark? She stammered. It means exactly what I said. I can't consider someone like you as my mother. No way. What about the allowance? Martha asked, panicked. Do you really think I would? You're on your own with the debts. We're moving, Mark said firmly. Wait, please. If you do that, what about my living expenses? Martha tearfully pleaded, reaching out to my husband. He forcefully shook off her hand, looked at her coldly, and said, I don't care about your living expenses. You have been living off us without even a single apology. I really understand your despicable nature now. Don't you dare show up in front of us again. No, wait, Mark. Martha called out as my husband grabbed her arm and dragged her to the front door. He threw her shoes and bag outside and chased Martha out of the house. She made a fuss outside for a while but disappeared after a bit, perhaps unable to withstand the eyes of the neighbors. She tried contacting us multiple times, but we ignored all of her attempts. We set Martha's number to be automatically rejected, and we finished moving. Regarding the matter of co-signing for the debts, it became invalid since Martha had made Mark the co-signer without his consent, and therefore he was not responsible. Without the allowance from us, Martha seems to be leading a miserable life. It's only natural, as she had been using the allowance for her gambling habits instead of paying off her debts. She still has a mountain of debts and is chased by debt collectors every day. She can't gamble anymore and seems to be working from dawn to dusk. For the foreseeable future, it's unlikely that she will be able to pay off her debts completely. She will have to keep working until she is unable to move. This is entirely her own doing. As for us, we are spending fulfilling days in our new home. My husband's condition has stabilized, and he has returned to work. After some time, there's a new life growing in my belly. We're going to have an additional member in our family next year. From now on, we want to spend happy days as a family of 3. And then, Bob dropped the bombshell. Clear out your room next month. When my mother gets discharged from the hospital, I'm bringing her straight to this house. Living together might make household chores easier, but I'll have to face my mother-in-law and endure her snide comments every single day. I was utterly devastated. Understanding that he seemed determined to make this happen with his mother, rather than argue with him, I knew it was better to discreetly take measures. Years of experience had taught me that. Bob left, not suspecting a thing, and seemed quite pleased. Everything's going according to my plan, I thought. It was so simple, it was laughable. A few hours later, after tidying up and taking a break, my phone rang loudly. It was a frantic call from Bob. "Hey, what the heck? The house is empty." I am Catherine Rose, a 45-year-old working mother holding a managerial position at a publishing company. I have a husband and 2 kids, a typical American family. When I got married, the idea of balancing work and family was just beginning to gain traction. It was an era when it was common for women to marry and become homemakers. Bob had allowed me to work, and in return, I've given my all to both my job and household chores. After having kids, I've been fully committed to raising them as well. But lately, I've been feeling overwhelmed. My mother-in-law, Mary, who was initially against me working, has started to complain. "When are you going to stop this job nonsense? You're such a terrible wife." Back in our day, the job came second. Our main duty was to dedicate ourselves to our homes. I've been working hard in both my career and home, raising the kids and managing household chores. I'd always thought of it as repaying the kindness Bob showed by supporting my career. Perhaps seeing my dedication, both my daughter and son help around the house. My daughter does the laundry and ironing, while my son takes care of the bath and fills the tub every day. When I come home, I just have to prepare the meal and clean up. I'm so grateful to my kids. But even though we're both working, Bob doesn't lift a finger. I've asked him to help out several times, but Bob's answer is always the same. "Catherine, I let you keep working, didn't I? You're trying to skip out on your wife duties and make me do the chores because you want to have an easy life. Quit playing the victim." And every time my mother-in-law would tattle on me, and I'd get an earful from her. "Bob's the breadwinner of the family, you know, and you're trying to make him do house chores. What are you thinking, Mary? This is why it's never good for a woman to work. Be grateful I even let you work. Understand your place." Lately, perhaps she's bored, but almost every night she calls with these snide remarks. It's become so frequent and unbearable that both my kids and I are fed up. My kids have even started pretending they are needed somewhere else to hang up the phone. Sure, I'd appreciate the opportunity to keep working, but why the constant hostility? I've been the one handling both the household chores and raising the kids. She should understand how challenging it is to juggle both roles. What more does she want from me? Right now, I'm under so much stress, and the only saving grace is that my kids are on my side. The root cause of this situation lies in Bob's salary. Truth be told, Bob's pay isn't that great. It would be considered on the lower end. He had a tough time finding a job and eventually landed one at a small company thanks to a family connection. If he had shown some initiative, I wouldn't have cared about the low salary and would have supported him wholeheartedly. However, Bob got down on himself because of the way he got the job. In the beginning, he used to mutter things about how he should have been working at a bigger, more renowned company. He only ever did the work given to him, never striving for promotions or looking for new job opportunities. Someone truly capable would have studied on the side or honed their skills to find better job opportunities, but Bob didn't. So he only ever got raises based on seniority, and his performance-based bonuses were always the bare minimum. On the other hand, the company I work for is a nationwide corporation with parental leave policies in place early on. While it felt the effects of the economic bubble, it's a reputable company that has managed to avoid major salary cuts. Moreover, I've climbed up to the position of manager, successfully handling a significant number of contracts and projects. Naturally, I've earned considerably more than Bob. I'm even covering our kids' expenses, using my paycheck to set aside money for their college funds. I've taken full advantage of the benefits of working for a large corporation. Looking back, it feels like I was living off my savings when I took parental leave for my 2 children and had no salary, With Bob's salary, there's no way he could cover all the living expenses with 2 kids. I don't recall ever receiving living expenses from Bob, and there's no record of any transfers. Perhaps Bob let me continue working because he thought he could rely on my earnings. Lately, I've been thinking about this a lot, wondering if we've mostly been living on my salary. To confirm this suspicion, I looked at my bank book, and it became evident. The rent, utilities, groceries, and the kids' school fees. I've been paying for all of it. There's not a single penny coming in from Bob's account. I chuckled, feeling utterly drained. Bob's salary is completely spent on his hobbies and providing pocket money to my mother-in-law. I've always believed I owed Bob for allowing me to continue working, which is why I've been putting in so much effort with household chores and childcare. However, the current situation is quite different. I'm covering all the living expenses while Bob freely spends his salary without saving a dime. In terms of supporting our lives, it seems I've become the main breadwinner, while Bob does as he pleases. If I were to leave with the kids, what would happen? Or if I handed him this bank book and told him to leave, would Bob quietly go along with his claim of being the main breadwinner? It's a perplexing situation, and I can't comprehend his perspective. His catchphrase is, "I'm the one supporting y'all. If you've got a problem, just leave." Is he under the impression that he covers the living expenses while spending his salary freely? It's a total mystery. If I, the one paying for everything, were to leave with the kids, what would transpire? Would Bob just quietly go along, sticking to his claim of being the main breadwinner? He'd probably tattle to my mother-in-law. I wonder if she knows about the difference in our salaries. If she did, she likely wouldn't make those snide remarks. Perhaps she thinks Bob is a wonderful son, supporting his family and even allowing his wife to work. If she knew about the salary difference, what would she think? Would she ditch Bob and cozy up to me? No, that's the last thing I'd want. As I contemplate these thoughts, my mother-in-law has an accident at her home and hurts her foot. It appears she'll need hospitalization and physical therapy for a while. With my father-in-law having passed away before Bob and I got married, my mother-in-law has been living alone. Either Bob or I have to take care of her. In a call from the hospitalized mother-in-law, she starts with her demands and continues despite my attempt to explain my work situation. I decide to let Bob handle her, given the stress of being criticized by her for working. When I ask Bob to care for my mother-in-law, he complains immediately. "Hey, Catherine, why aren't you looking after Mom? I'm working too, you know." Despite being his mother, he shifts all caregiving responsibilities to his wife. Holding back my frustration, I reply, "I have work too, Bob, plus all the chores at home. If you'd help around the house, maybe I could visit her more. More importantly, I think your mom would be happier if it was you who came to care for her." While venting stress on a daughter-in-law is common, it's better to approach such situations with positivity. So I keep finding reasons to avoid caring for my mother-in-law. I diligently washed and folded my mother-in-law's laundry, carefully packing it into a bag. If she asked for specific items, I made sure to buy them, even checking the names of the products she requested. Even if Bob took credit for these things and I ended up shouldering the blame, I didn't mind. I just wanted to avoid hearing my mother-in-law's snide remarks. Thankfully, my judgment seemed right. My mother-in-law greeted Bob with a big smile every day. Apparently, for a mother like mine, nothing beats the joy of being cherished by her son. Having her beloved son around must feel much better than dealing with a daughter-in-law she'd want to make sarcastic comments about every day. It seemed like she eagerly awaited Bob's return from work, focusing on chatting with him. She handed Bob a shopping list note, and since the first time she was admitted to the hospital, she hadn't called me. Observing my mother-in-law's smiling interactions with Bob, it seemed he felt like he was being a good son. Even when he returned home at night, he handed me the laundry and shopping notes without any complaints. Although Bob would throw in some sarcastic remarks at me while handing over my mother-in-law's things, I was able to live peacefully. In the middle of the night, I muttered to myself that I just didn't want to hear any of my mother-in-law's complaints right now. I hoped for things to stay peaceful for a while. However, injuries took a toll on my mother-in-law's age, and despite my efforts through Bob for her rehab, she tended to skip it. Delighted with her son's visits, she would wait in her room for Bob's arrival, making various requests. While my mother-in-law rarely called on me directly, I was the one who actually fulfilled her requests, running errands, doing laundry, and even bringing her snacks. All she did was sit in her hospital room, chatting cheerfully with her son, while I handled the housework. It was a relief not to see my mother-in-law, but I was worn out from her numerous requests, and shopping alone became a significant chore. Understanding that living alone was inconvenient with her weakened legs, my mother-in-law made a shocking request to Bob. She expressed difficulty in shopping and preparing meals, asking him not to leave her alone. Of course, Bob sided with her, suggesting they live together. It seemed they were moving in that direction without consulting me. Finally, Bob dropped the bombshell. He would be living with his mother starting next month, instructing me to clear out my room. From the perspective of efficiency in household chores, it made sense for my mother-in-law to live with us. However, I was now faced with the prospect of seeing my mother-in-law every day and enduring her nagging. Despite my downcast feelings, Bob acted as if it was already decided that we would all live together. "I understand," I replied with little energy. Bob seemed determined to force this co-living situation, regardless of the despair I felt. It might be better to secretly make plans rather than argue about it. I knew this from years of experience. While Bob and my mother-in-law happily planned for the move, I constantly thought about how I could escape. I have my own room where I gather and review work materials. It's like a study or an office, essential for me. Bob wants me to give it up. Without this room, my work would be impacted, and I might have to come home even later than I do now. I muttered to myself while staring at the bookshelf, wondering where to move all these books and documents. I can't leave them at home if we live with my mother-in-law. They're too important to risk getting thrown away or damaged. It may sound like something out of a TV drama, but I really fear she might throw them out, especially since she'll probably target what she knows is important to me. And if I dare complain, she'll feign ignorance and run to Bob for support. There will be no peace for me in this house once we start living together. I can see her bossing me around and making snide remarks about my work, wearing me out. What should I do? If my mother-in-law is coming to this house, I had a sudden realization. Why hadn't I thought of this simple solution before? It seems living with my mother-in-law and all her nagging wore me down more than I realized. It felt like the fog before my eyes was gradually clearing up. Well, of course, there's absolutely no need for me to hold back. Why didn't I realize something so simple? I mumbled to myself and immediately began making preparations. As the month changed, the day of my mother-in-law's discharge from the hospital arrived. Bob was all excited, having taken the day off from the start of the morning. "Hey, you better take proper care of my mom from now on. Don't think I'm going to step in like I did when she was in the hospital," he said in a commanding tone. Without responding to Bob's order, I changed the subject. "Oh, speaking of which, your mom's been in the hospital for quite a while, right? Hospital food is bland, and they don't give you much. I bet a gourmet like her wasn't satisfied. I think the discharge process and packing will take up the morning. So why don't you take her out for some good food? You took the day off after all. How about a nice drive, just the two of you? I think she'd really appreciate it." I handed Bob a generous amount of cash. I had set aside some money for living expenses and even Bob's personal spending, but this was more than his monthly allowance. Surprised by the unexpected bonus, Bob's spirits lifted even higher. "Well, aren't you thoughtful? All right, I'll use this money and go for a drive with my mom. I'll give you a call when we decide about dinner. Make sure the house is in tip-top shape for my mom. All right." Without a hint of suspicion, Bob happily left. Everything was going just as I had planned. It was almost too simple. I couldn't help but laugh. This should buy me some time. I eagerly anticipated Bob and my mother-in-law's return as I continued tidying up the house. It was crucial to finish cleaning before they came back. A few hours later, just as I was taking a break after completing my tasks, my cell phone rang loudly. The call came in a flustered tone from Bob. "Hey, what's going on? The house is empty." That's right. After Bob went to pick up my mother-in-law, I moved all our stuff to the new house we just rented. Of course, I left some of Bob's personal belongings and a bed for my mother-in-law in the room. "Oh, you're back already. You told me to clear out the room, so I emptied both the room and the living room for Mom to feel comfortable. From now on, please enjoy your time with her," I responded nonchalantly, which only infuriated Bob. "You've got to be kidding me. The living room and kitchen are totally empty. After all I've done to support this family, how could you?" There it was, his go-to line. He seemed to believe that saying this put him in a superior position. How naive. "No, Bob. I've been the one supporting the family, including you. Weren't you spending your paycheck on pocket money for your mom and your own hobbies, and yet you demand an allowance from the family budget? How does that make you the breadwinner?" Bob seemed surprised by my resistance, but he retorted nonetheless. His argument, however, was nonsensical. "Shut it. I'm the man here. I'm the head of this household. You, as my wife, should just do as I say. Now put everything back the way it was." "No thanks. I bought all the furniture in the living room and all the kitchenware with my salary. The kids are with me, so don't worry. I also paid for the rent, utilities, and groceries of that house. So, in reality, I'm the breadwinner. Why did you decide to live with your mom without consulting me? I can't live with someone so selfish as you. Wish you can be the provider. Now live your life as you please." It seemed that Bob finally realized my intentions. "Hold on. Are you saying the rent for this place I've paid up until the end of this month, but from next month, you'll need to handle it? I've also canceled all the automatic payments for electricity, gas, and the internet. So good luck with that." Bob's words probably tipped off the situation. My mother-in-law also started making a racket in a loud voice. "How could you do this, Catherine? Just because you have a job doesn't mean you can act all high and mighty. Fine, Bob and I will live here in luxury." Oh, does my mother-in-law not know about Bob's earnings? I hope you can have that luxurious life. That is, if your son can afford it anyway. Goodbye. Wait, Catherine. Where are you right now? I didn't bother listening to the rest of Bob's rant. I hung up and blocked both Bob and my mother-in-law's numbers. The aftermath unfolded as expected. With his meager salary from an uninspiring job at a small company, Bob had little left after paying the rent and utilities for the needlessly spacious apartment that once housed a family of 4. Constant bickering between Bob and my mother-in-law became a regular occurrence. In their new, oversized living space, complaints about meals were met with retorts like, "Can't you provide something better for your mother? And shut up. If you want something else, make it yourself. You're just making excuses, saying walking is too hard after slacking off on your rehab. You don't do anything at home, Mom. You're just wasting time." Neglecting her rehabilitation, my mother-in-law's legs weakened, and she refused to engage in any home workouts. Frustration crept in as her unreasonable demands on Bob increased. There were even concerns about early signs of Alzheimer's. Adding my mother-in-law's pension, their financial situation felt like poverty. Moving to a smaller, more suitable place seemed logical, but it appeared Bob hadn't considered it. Since that incident, I had blocked all communication from both Bob and my mother-in-law. They didn't know our new address, and any attempts to contact me were futile. Their living situation was on the verge of collapse. With a decent income, thanks to my children's help, I managed to lease a nice apartment where each of my kids had their own room. A spacious room served as both a bedroom and workspace. Although the rent might be a bit high, without Bob in the picture, I was saving more than enough. My children, tired of being belittled by their father, were now living freely. Their helpfulness around the house was evident, and chores felt good without the constant criticism. Praising and thanking them for their assistance became a normal occurrence, and I was glad my children hadn't become bitter. Heading back to the apartment where my kids awaited, I initiated divorce proceedings through a lawyer. I lived on my salary while Bob spent all his earnings on himself and my mother-in-law, a valid reason for divorce in my book. Bob tried to argue against it, but my lawyer shut him down every time. His claim of being the breadwinner without contributing was labeled as verbal and financial abuse. In exchange for not seeking alimony and child support, I got custody of the kids. We agreed on no property division since the savings for the kids' college were from my earnings. Grateful that the car and house were in my name and rented, I could now focus on my job without complaints. With the money saved for college and my future earnings, I planned to support my kids in whatever they'd wanted to pursue. Today, I was determined to work hard.
An old man with dementia is nothing but a burden, I thought. The idea of spending my remaining years caring for someone in such a state was unbearable. I longed for a fresh start in a new home with a new partner. My mother-in-law, clearly determined to leave her husband behind, was ready to start anew despite his condition and the $3.3 million debt he carried. "I can't continue as his wife any longer," she declared. "You, on the other hand, seem to get along with him. Take care of his debt and look after him, will you?" With that, she left the house she had shared with him for many years, leaving me with a mixture of shock and loneliness. Seeing her leave so cheerfully was jarring. I approached my father-in-law, who stood quietly at the entrance. "Thank you, Tom, for always treating me with kindness," I said. "I appreciate that you consider me like your real daughter. As your daughter-in-law, I'll do everything I can. Let's work through this together." Despite my words, I was filled with uncertainty about how to support him and alleviate his suffering. Yet, I felt a strong resolve to encourage him and envision a brighter future. When I noticed his shoulders trembling, I leaned in, thinking he was crying. To my surprise, he was chuckling. "I've been waiting for her to leave for a long time," he said, catching me off guard. He began to share stories from the past and his plans for the future. "I'm Naomi, 42 years old, and I lead a vibrant life with my wonderful husband, Harry, and his loving parents. Originally from a small town in Chicago, I moved to New York for university and then dove into the IT industry. It was there that I met Harry, my calm and serious boss. As we grew closer, we began to envision a future together. We decided to marry, and I chose to live with Harry's warm family. Although I was initially nervous about living with his family, having been raised by just my mother, the challenges of dealing with my fertility issues made me yearn for a lively family life. My father-in-law, Tom, was the president of the company I used to work for. Harry, his son, had started from the bottom and was steadily climbing the ranks. It wasn't until we decided to marry that I realized Harry was the son of the company's top executive. After our wedding, I left my job, but Harry continued to rise through the ranks. He started questioning Tom's business policies and had ambitions to grow the company himself. As Tom aged, rumors spread that he might retire, and Harry seemed to be waiting for that moment. Despite his age, Tom remained energetic and eager to try new things. He recently expressed a desire to create a space in his home for the local community to relax, chat, enjoy tea, and share homemade meals. However, my mother-in-law was completely against this idea. Even though she was only 5 years younger than Tom and meticulously maintained her appearance, she wasn't great at housework. Their meals were mostly takeout, and they often hired professionals for cleaning. Their affluent lifestyle was supported by Tom's stable job, but with his impending retirement, their income would decrease. The prospect of having strangers in their home for the community space stressed my mother-in-law. Despite Tom's respect for her wishes, he couldn't give up on his dream. Consequently, the renovation project was postponed. In the end, Tom decided to step down due to health concerns. Harry was chosen as the next president, but instead of taking over all at once, he would gradually learn the ropes until he was ready for full responsibility. My mother-in-law had become increasingly distant from my father-in-law. Even when he appeared tired and worn out, she ignored him and offered no support. The tension in their home grew palpable as she struggled to support his dream, and their interactions became strained. When Harry first began taking over the business, he and his father maintained a close and communicative relationship. However, as Harry gained confidence in his role, his demeanor at home began to change. He started treating his father with the same coldness that his mother displayed. Tom began to voice concerns about Harry's behavior at the company. Despite Harry's enthusiasm for his work, Tom worried that his son's attitude towards his colleagues and the work environment was problematic. Tom once confided in me that he feared Harry might be too harsh with his subordinates. Having experienced my own parents' divorce and a limited relationship with my biological father, Tom holds a special place in my heart. He's always been warm yet self-disciplined, and I deeply respect him as if he were my own father. He also cares for me and has started to share his thoughts and feelings with me, which has made it all the more painful to witness the growing distance between him, my mother-in-law, and Harry. Both were stubborn and resistant to any attempts I made to encourage openness. Then, one day, my mother-in-law suggested a family meeting. She proposed selling their current house and building a new one. I was intrigued by how the family would respond. "There's an old house for sale next door," she said. "It's a bit dated, but with some care and attention, it could become a beautiful home. We could even create a lovely space in the garden for everyone to enjoy." Her enthusiasm was a refreshing change from her usual reluctance. Tom's eyes lit up at the idea. "That sounds wonderful. We could definitely make a space in the garden for everyone to enjoy." Harry smiled and said, "If it makes you happy, I'm all for it." And so, plans for the new house began, with my mother-in-law taking the lead on the project. When I inquired about the progress of the new house, my mother-in-law confidently told me to leave it to her and not to interfere. She seemed to be communicating frequently with Harry, and I assumed things were going smoothly. However, I was stunned when I received shocking news. My father-in-law had accumulated a debt of $3.3 million. Despite his reputation as a seasoned business figure with substantial investment experience, his calm demeanor had concealed the scale of his financial troubles. My mother-in-law's first reaction was to worry about the future of the new house. Although my father-in-law tried to reassure her, saying, "Don't worry, everything will be all right. I'll sort it out," her anxiety was palpable. She began treating him even more coldly than before. One day, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, I overheard a hushed conversation between Harry and my mother-in-law. They were discussing the ownership of the new house, and I was shocked to learn that despite my father-in-law providing the funds, they were planning to proceed with the house under Harry's name without informing Tom. I couldn't believe they were making such a significant decision without involving him. "Aren't you both making decisions about such an important matter without including everyone? Shouldn't the whole family discuss this together?" My mother-in-law's response was sharp. "You know, Tom is showing his age, and there's also the debt issue. Besides, you've only recently joined this family. It's best if you just observe and stay quiet for now. The only person I truly rely on is Harry." Her blunt words stung, and Harry didn't offer much of a response. He had been so absorbed in his work lately that our time together as a couple had diminished. The only person I genuinely trusted and could confide in was my father-in-law. Yet recently he seemed different. Where he once was lively and busy, he now spent more time sitting on the couch, lost in thought. I suspected that my father-in-law might be troubled by his debts, but it seemed like there was something more going on. "Have we had dinner yet?" he suddenly asked as I was finishing up the dishes. "We just had hamburgers, salad, and soup together," I replied after a moment of thought. "Right, sorry about that," he said and retreated to his room. His forgetfulness was unusual, and it made me uneasy. I suggested that he see a doctor, but he dismissed it with a laugh, attributing it to fatigue. When I spoke with my mother-in-law, she remarked, "Tom's charm was his intelligence and his money. Without those, he's nothing." I also discussed it with Harry, but he seemed preoccupied with work. He mentioned that things felt off and that there was a need for timely leadership at the company. Amidst all this, I felt a deep sense of loneliness, as if no one in the family was genuinely concerned. I repeatedly urged my father-in-law to see a doctor, but he consistently refused. His condition seemed to worsen, and I took it upon myself to research dementia, trying various approaches and continuously persuading him to get help. "You must be having a hard time," my mother-in-law said with a sigh and a cold smile. "Tom isn't the man he used to be. Once Harry takes over the company, everything will be his. Isn't it only natural that Tom should have nothing left?" Her eyes were colder than I had ever seen, a look I had never encountered before. Her harsh words and the growing tension in the house left me feeling both surprised and anxious. With the atmosphere growing more strained, I hoped that moving to a new house would help refresh our spirits. Finally, the moving day arrived. We hired professionals to handle the large furniture while we took care of the smaller items. My mother-in-law provided specific instructions such as where to place each item, and we followed them carefully. The last items to be moved were the cherished belongings of my father-in-law and me. I returned to our old place to fetch my father-in-law when my mother-in-law appeared unexpectedly. "Thank you, everything is sorted now," she said. "Actually, I've arranged another moving destination for you as well." Her shocking revelation left me speechless. I stammered. "What do you mean?" She handed me a note with the address of a nearby flat. Seeing her smiling face, I was at a loss for words. She cheerfully explained, "The new house will be for me, Harry, and Ted to enjoy. So you and Tom should start fresh in your new place." I couldn't grasp what was happening. The only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't leave my father-in-law alone. As I prepared to leave, she added, "Well, Tom needs you now. Do your best for him. We can think about what comes next when the time is right." My mind was spinning with shock and confusion. Who was this Ted she mentioned? I could hardly think straight. "How can you abandon Tom after all the years of support he's given to the family?" I asked, my voice trembling. She laughed, absent-mindedly playing with her hair. "I want to enjoy my life too. I've taken care of Tom's needs, but daily life with him has become tedious. I want a fresh start with Ted." I couldn't believe her words. It seemed my mother-in-law was set on leaving her long supportive husband to pursue a new life with someone else. Tears welled up in my eyes. "So all your plans for a new life come at our expense?" With a glint in her eye, she replied, "Grow up a little. We all have the right to seek new beginnings. Besides, if people knew about Tom's $3.3 million debt, they'd reconsider too." For a moment, I was utterly speechless, struggling to process the gravity of her decision. I was stunned by my mother-in-law's audacity. Despite my shock and confusion, I knew I had to stay calm and handle the situation for my own sake. "You're saddled with a $3.3 million debt, and continuing this marriage is unfeasible," she said dismissively. "My husband seems to have a fondness for you, so you can manage the debt and take care of him." With that, she offloaded her responsibilities onto me and left the house without a second thought about the dire situation her husband was in. Watching her leave with such confidence, I was overwhelmed by a mix of shock and loneliness. After she departed, I approached my father-in-law, who stood dejectedly at the entrance. "Tom, thank you for always being so kind to me," I said softly. "I'm honored that you see me as your own daughter. I promise to do everything I can as your daughter-in-law. We'll face this together." Although I tried to comfort him, I was engulfed by anxiety, unsure how to support him and ease his suffering. Yet a deep desire to help the man I respected and to envision a brighter future for him filled my heart. As his shoulders began to tremble, I leaned in, worried that he might be crying. To my surprise, he was laughing uncontrollably. "I've been waiting for her to leave for a long time," he said, his laughter still echoing. His unexpected reaction left me stunned. He continued, "When she talked about wanting a new house, I saw it as an opportunity. She's so dependent on me that I hoped she'd ask for a divorce. I didn't expect to be kicked out of the house, though." I was dumbfounded by his revelation. His elaborate act had completely fooled me. Seeing the confusion on my face, Tom smiled gently. "Naomi, I'm sorry things turned out this way, but don't worry about the investment. Even if it goes wrong, we won't lose much. Now the real adventure begins." When we arrived at the new house, my mother-in-law was visibly upset. "Naomi, why did you bring Tom here? You two were supposed to move into a flat. Plus, my new boyfriend is coming tomorrow. Harry's taking over the business, so I need Tom's bank statements," she demanded, flustered. Tom, seemingly unaffected by her dismay, turned to her with a steely gaze. "I know you plan to enjoy your time with your new lover," he said, shifting the atmosphere dramatically. My mother-in-law was taken aback, and Harry stood silent, watching the confrontation unfold. "I've already transferred the ownership of this house to my name," my father-in-law said with a hint of apology. "It'll be difficult for you to stay here now." His words left my mother-in-law speechless, her eyes widening in disbelief. "But don't worry, I've found a flat nearby for you. Enjoy your new life with your boyfriend. I'll cover the rent for the first few months," he added, his smile cold. Until that day, my father-in-law had always dealt with my mother-in-law's selfishness with patience and a smile. But now his eyes were sharp with anger, and his stern demeanor seemed to make her shrink. "I'm truly sorry," she said, her voice trembling as she fought back tears. I was scared when I thought you had dementia, and when I heard about the $3.3 million debt, I was overwhelmed with anxiety. But I've always loved you. I never imagined it would end like this." Her words were filled with regret and desperation, but it was too late for apologies. My father-in-law chuckled bitterly. "The $3.3 million debt isn't as daunting as it seems. I married you for your vibrant spirit, not for your money. It's clear now that love isn't in your heart. I want to spend my remaining years in peace, and I don't want you here anymore. Please leave." Without even looking at her, he asked her to leave. Harry, stunned, gathered my mother-in-law's belongings and placed them by the door. He didn't want to abandon her but seemed to be trying to make amends with his father, perhaps to protect his own interests. "What are you saying, Harry? Are you leaving me behind? Help me. Forgive me just one more time," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Ignoring her cries, my father-in-law and Harry walked into their new home. Her heartbreaking screams echoed in the tense atmosphere, but I followed them inside. Later, Harry made desperate attempts to reconcile with his father, but his work attitudes and interpersonal issues proved problematic. The company had another promising successor who had been performing well, and responsibilities were gradually being handed over to him. Consequently, my father-in-law entrusted the company to this new successor and stepped down as president. Harry, who had assumed he would naturally take over, was deeply shocked. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law began her new life in a small flat with her affair partner Ted. However, her new life didn't bring the happiness she had hoped for. Eventually, their relationship soured, leaving her alone once again. Concerned for her, I occasionally checked in on her. Her current state, far from her once glamorous days, was lonely and hard to witness. In contrast, my father-in-law and I began building a community space in our area. He provided the financial support, while I worked diligently to create a welcoming environment. The space became a local sensation, featured in magazines and online, and attracted many visitors. Riding this wave, we established an organization and expanded our activities. Harry, having left his previous job, now participates in our efforts. He used to be quite prideful, but through interactions with diverse people, I hope he becomes kinder and more compassionate. Together, we aim to fulfill Tom's dream and strengthen our community bonds, looking forward to many joyful days ahead.
My request for approval was promptly denied. It would be fine if it's the storage shed. I exclaimed, "Don't make a fool of me. Our house is fairly spacious. If the rooms were tidied up, there would be no problem having my father live with us. Truly, my husband's feelings for me and my family are less than that of a pet. Well then, I will sincerely clean up the storage shed and renovate it. Even the storage shed can be used just like a regular room if it's clean. There's meaning in living with my father now," I determined. Aaron, however, seemed unenthusiastic. "There's no way I'm doing such a thing. Why do I have to renovate for your father?" I recalled the major renovation we did to ensure my mother-in-law, who visits sometimes, would not have trouble staying over. We even installed a bathroom and toilet, similar to a hotel. I won't rely on such a demon-like man anymore. I made a decision. My name is Vivian Westhill, 52 years old. I help with the company my husband runs. My son, Matthew, has left home, and it's just the two of us living together. My mother-in-law sometimes comes over, but since her house is nearby, she doesn't live with us. Reflecting on how I met my husband nearly 30 years ago, I shared, I hate to say it myself, but I was famous for being good-looking in my hometown. My mother passed away in a traffic accident when I was in middle school, and I was helping each other out with my father. Although I was invited out by many men, they were nothing but a hindrance to me. I had a dream of becoming an accountant and was working hard towards that. Despite my popularity, I had a boyfriend of the same age. We would secretly call each other and go out to eat after part-time. I had no intention of dating anyone else. The only people I could let my guard down with were him and my father. He alone appreciated not my appearance, but my seriousness and true strength, among other aspects of my personality and way of thinking. I think we would have become a couple even if I wasn't the same appearance. That was the kind of relationship we had. However, everything changed one day when I returned home to find an unfamiliar family of 3 in my house. Seeing me, my father made a troubled face. I must have been more surprised. A known family introduced themselves. "We are the West Hills." Hearing the name West Hill made it click. A famous rich family in town. I wondered why they were in my house. "Welcome home, Vivian. Mr. West Hill here wants to take you as his wife." Shocked, I protested. "A wife? Marriage? What are you talking about? I had never seen these 3 before. Everyone knows they hold significant influence in town as a wealthy family. Yet the talk of me becoming a bride was unbelievable." "Nice to meet you, Vivian. Our Aaron has fallen for you at first sight. He insists on having you as his wife." My would-be father-in-law began speaking. Despite feeling unreal, they didn't disappear, and I was told, "Take your time and talk it over with your father. We'll come back in a week to hear your answer." As they left, I pondered, could our fate be decided in just a week? It didn't seem real. I thought things like this only happened in dramas, and I couldn't believe it was happening to me. Stunned, I watched as the 3 of them left. "Dad, what's this about a debt? What's your relation with those people?" My father turned to me with a pale face, drained of all blood. "Vivian, I'm sorry. It's true. I was lonely and started drinking and gambling. Before I knew it, the money was gone, and I began borrowing to cover it. Everything I heard since coming home was beyond my capacity to accept. Debts? Why didn't you tell me? I understand you were lonely after Mom suddenly passed away, but having a debt." I couldn't think calmly, naturally. I couldn't even talk about it calmly. This was indeed out of the blue. As far as I could remember, my father never got drunk or angry from losing at gambling. I didn't even know. Mr. West Hill invited me and introduced me to a place with Mr. West Hill's face. We could drink on a tab, and I didn't even know how much the bill was accumulating. The same thing with gambling. He let me buy lottery tickets together, and it just piled up. My father is truly a good person, not knowing how to doubt people. It must have been easy for someone like a scam artist. They must have been scheming from the start to trap my father and have their way with me. Interrupting my thoughts, I questioned, "Hold on a second. What happens to you if I don't marry their son?" In desperation, I pondered if there was any alternative. The looming threat of being pursued by debt collectors or sent to a work camp left me trembling. I clung to a shred of hope, suggesting, "There's no such thing as work camps these days. Can't you just keep working hard to pay it off?" My father's response was disheartening. "Sorry, Vivian, that's impossible. Debt collectors might start contacting my workplace. I might not be able to work anymore." Feeling completely cornered and with no more options to explore, I decided it was enough. There was nothing more to discuss. Despite wanting to vent my feelings of frustration, humiliation, and anger, I couldn't bring myself to do that to my father, who had always taken care of me. I packed my bags and made the immediate decision to go to the West Hill family. There was no use worrying about it. Making this decision wasn't easy, but considering the increasing interest on the debt, I couldn't cling to my home any longer. Marrying Aaron seemed to be the only way to resolve this, and before I could change my mind, I quietly left the house. That night, I arrived at the West Hills home and boldly knocked on the front door. "You're early. Seems like you're blinded by money, just like everyone else," Aaron remarked. Frustration boiled within me, and I wanted to scream that I didn't want any money and wasn't unhappy because I was poor. But his words treated me like a possession, objectifying, and disgusting. Leaving everything behind, I looked forward to being with him from now on, offering a forced greeting as I entered the West Hill household. After that, everything progressed in a whirlwind. Betrayed by my trusted father and breaking up with my beloved boyfriend, it felt like all my emotions had disappeared. The grand wedding with a local famous person, attended by many, blurred in my memory. The only vivid image was my father's haggard look, erasing my resentment towards him. Accepting this as my fate, I decided to change my outlook and enjoy my married life. Little did I know, that was just the beginning of a harrowing experience. Responsibilities piled up, from housework to assisting with the family business, and the pressure to have children took a toll on my mental state. My mother-in-law constantly nagged, and my husband's initial kindness turned into indifference. It was far from the sweet married life I had imagined. "You're completely useless. A woman from the club would be better. Just quietly do your job and chores," my husband declared, treating me like a housemaid. When I became pregnant, even severe morning sickness didn't evoke sympathy. "You're getting fat. Just do your chores and work properly. I don't know why I married you." I gave up on being acknowledged in this home. A wife from a poor family would never be seen as more than a servant. Frustrating as it was, for the sake of my unborn child, I had to endure. Eventually, I gave birth to a boy, but my husband, now with an heir, hardly ever came home. When he did, he reeked of strong perfume and alcohol, evidence of his time spent at clubs. However, my primary focus was on raising my child, so my husband's absence brought a sense of relief. Matthew, my son, grew up healthy and was easy to raise, despite my mother-in-law's persistent annoyance, claiming that Aaron would have been a better choice. I preferred Matthew not turning into a worthless man. My kind-hearted son aspired to become a doctor, and when he left for university, I felt a void in my heart. To fill that emptiness, I decided to dedicate myself more to my work. Around that time, my father-in-law, who had treated me as a human being, passed away. My mother-in-law moved to a condo near the downtown area, enjoying the inheritance from my father-in-law. With the loss of the person who had supported and cared for me like my own father, I began to miss my father. Taking advantage of my husband's indifference, I started talking to my father again, just like old times. Though it was challenging to speak without making my father feel guilty, one day he looked serious. When I asked what was wrong, he said in a resigned tone that he was diagnosed with malignant lymphoma and had only 6 months to live. I was utterly shocked and couldn't believe it. "No way, Dad, that can't be. You're so lively. It's impossible that you only have half a year left, just when we could finally be like a father and daughter again. I can't bear the thought of never seeing you again." Despite my emotional plea, my father smiled kindly and nodded. Wanting to ensure he wouldn't be alone, I decided to ask my husband to let him live with us in our spacious home. I'm not ready to give up, but at least I don't want him to be alone. My father expressed happiness hearing those words and left with a gentle smile. For the first time since getting married, I decided to confront my husband that night. As usual, he came home drunk with the smell of perfume. Seeing me awake and waiting for him, he looked startled. "What's the matter? Don't tell me you want some affection." It seemed he hadn't changed his view on women being objects. I looked straight at him and said, "Aaron, I have something important to talk about. My father has been diagnosed with terminal cancer and has only 6 months to live. I want him to live with us in this house. Of course, I won't let it be a bother to you. We can just use one of the vacant rooms in the house. That's okay, right? You will listen to such a request, won't you?" Since my husband was hardly at home, there should have been no reason to object. I took it for granted that he would agree. But the unexpected reply was, "Just leave that half-dead old man alone. I'm not going to let someone like that into the house. It'll ruin the atmosphere." "Absolutely not. If you want to do that, you can leave. I have no intention of living with a sick person." My request was flatly denied, and I felt like I had fallen into a gaping hole in the ground. In my heart, I screamed, "If you want, the shed is fine. Don't mock me. Our house is quite large, and there is no problem if my father moves in. After cleaning up a room, we can live without facing each other. My husband really holds feelings for me and my family that are less than that for a pet. Well then, I will seriously clean and renovate the storage shed. If the storage shed is cleaned, it can be used just like a normal room. There is meaning in living with my father now." However, my husband remained adamant, saying, "There's no way I'm doing such a thing. Why do I have to renovate for your father? Recalling the major renovation I did for my mother-in-law, I decided not to rely on such a demon-like man anymore. Since then, I worked more than ever and visited my father when I had the time. Some days he seemed to be doing well, and other days he seemed to be doing badly. I couldn't feel alive every day unless I saw my father's face. I was only praying for my father's illness to be cured. Miraculously, my prayers seemed to be heard, as my father was still alive after 6 months. A bright light seemed to shine, and I started to live positively, little by little. About half a year after my father's confession, my husband came back with a pale face. I sensed that something serious had happened because he had never come back early since we got married. Sit down. I have important news. I was told that I have cancer, and my life expectancy is short. Come to think of it, my husband had been looking pale lately. I thought it was due to drinking too much alcohol or lack of sleep. Strangely, I was not shocked. It was completely someone else's problem. Besides, everyone should take care of themselves. You were like, leave that half-dead man alone, right? I'll do just as you said. If you want me to leave, I'm leaving. Oh yes, I found a lawyer for our divorce matters. I left the room without looking back. I decided to leave suddenly, but I did not regret it at all. You don't have a penny, do you? Where do you think you're going, leaving this house? You won't be able to live a luxurious life like you have been. You have been living on everything I have worked hard for, you inhuman. Does he still think that I have been living in this house for money? I had been subjected to brainwashing through my mother-in-law and endured verbal abuse from my husband, believing that I needed to stay and protect this house. However, since learning about my father's terminal diagnosis 6 months ago, I woke up to the realization that I couldn't continue living like this. During this time, I mentally prepared myself for divorce, ready to leave the house at any moment. My husband continued to shout something in the background, but it no longer concerned me. I never aspired for a luxurious life. All I needed was the ability to eat 3 meals a day and a place to sleep. I returned to my room, packed only the essentials into my suitcase, and left the house. Whether my husband faced trouble or not, it didn't matter to me. I promptly sent the email I had drafted, resigning from my position to the company's president. I aimed to settle everything related to my husband and the West Hill family, which I had been supporting for nearly 30 years. In fact, since discussing my father's situation half a year ago, I had been in contact with a divorce specialist lawyer recommended by the company's advisory lawyer. I shared everything about our marriage, starting from events before our marriage. The lawyer listened quietly, nodding in understanding. When I mentioned that I had been working for the family business without pay, the lawyer was genuinely surprised. It would amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid salary. After finishing my story, he immediately commented that the divorce should be straightforward. I had also gathered evidence of my husband's faults, including photos of emails from other women and notes documenting serious moral harassment. Additionally, I had recorded his verbally abusive remarks on my smartphone. While that evidence was sufficient, the lawyer also provided photos of my husband's infidelity for free. He assured me that everything would go well, even if I didn't take further action. He urged me to feel like I was on a big ship and didn't need to answer the angry calls from my husband, as he would handle everything. I walked with a smile, naturally ignoring the angry calls. Amidst the calls from my husband, there were also calls from my mother-in-law, likely questioning if I planned to abandon everything when my son was in trouble. If her son was in trouble, she should take care of him herself. Although a luxurious room resembling a show home awaited her return to that house, she seemed panicked. The company started by my father-in-law was falling apart without me, who had been a crucial support. The president, who was more of a decoration due to ESS, couldn't steer the company effectively, and things were not going well. Some colleagues had reached out, asking me to come back, but I had no intention of dedicating myself to the company any longer. Despite its local significance, the number of clients would steadily decrease. While I felt sorry for letting my father-in-law's hard-earned company decline, I believed that if my husband and mother-in-law had worked as diligently as him, this wouldn't have happened. My decision to quit might have been different, and my son Matthew might have considered taking over the family business. Furthermore, my husband not only contributed little to the company, but also seemed to constantly engage in inappropriate behavior with female employees, leading to suspicions and resignations. It appears that those women are planning to sue the company for sexual harassment. Now, my husband has to handle the repercussions of the mess he created in his life, and it seems that justice is catching up with him. I desired justice for my husband and mother-in-law, wanting them to face proper consequences so that those who had worked honestly wouldn't be made to look foolish. To add to the turmoil, the company faced accusations of tax evasion by the IRS, discovered accidentally while my lawyer was investigating. Further examination revealed questionable points in the accounts, raising suspicions of my husband's embezzlement. Looking back, it was odd that he had substantial money at his disposal, considering his salary. While assisting with the accounting, I had been indifferent to my husband's financial activities, not realizing the disparity between his income and expenditures. If I had questioned where the excess funds were coming from, I would have understood the truth. In reality, he'd have been squandering the company's money, including my salary that he had transferred to his own account. Kickbacks for orders, bribes for personal gain, tax evasion, and special embezzlement. My husband's crimes were diverse. I couldn't predict whether the court's judgment or his life expectancy would come first, but I desired him to atone for as much as possible. 6 months ago, I began scrutinizing the books, copying them to preserve evidence, and submitting them to the IRS. My prior study to become an accountant proved beneficial in this endeavor. To bridge the financial gap, my husband sold the company to a major corporation and hastily disposed of the large mansion at a bargain. My mother-in-law also sold her condo to meet the IRS obligations and pay me. Now they live together in a small apartment complex, and rumors suggest my husband has several children from affairs, necessitating child support payments. Despite his age, my husband seems to have life insurance, but its adequacy is uncertain. My mother-in-law, previously condescending, now works to cover her son's medical and living expenses. The parent and child should reflect on their actions until the end. Receiving a substantial amount, I purchased a condo in a convenient location. I reunited with my father, who is now recovering, thanks to Matthew's introduction to a renowned doctor. My father had been living with Matthew, saving money for me to free me from financial burdens. Matthew, considering my father more respectable than his own, agreed to my request. Living together until the condo was secured, I chose a place close to Matthew's home. I started working at the law firm that aided me, contributing to corporate cases. Despite not being an accountant, my experience is an asset, and I'm studying to acquire a tax accountant qualification. My husband is serving an actual imprisonment sentence, relieving concerns about money or sustenance. Ironically, my mother-in-law moved into a relative's house, experiencing what it's like to be in need after acting superior for so long. Seeking justice for my mistreatment, I'm astounded by the prevalence of power and sexual harassment in various transactions. I worried about potential job losses due to the company acquisition, but it seems to have worked out for most. As everything falls into place, I savor the happiness that comes from knowing I made the right choices. Returning home from work, I find my father and another man waiting. It's my ex-boyfriend, the person I truly loved. After nearly 30 years, he welcomes me back warmly. My father, who had apologized to him when I escaped from the troubled house, knew about my ex-boyfriend. The 3 men, including Matthew, were watching over me. Now, I plan to live with these 3 men whom I genuinely love from the bottom of my heart.
Hi, I'm Safia, a 29-year-old graphic designer who's been trying to navigate the complex world of marriage and family life for the past 3 years. Before I share my story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life tales full of unexpected twists. Now, let me take you through the heartaches that unfolded just before what was supposed to be a dream vacation. We had been eagerly anticipating this trip for months, A family getaway to Hawaii, the kind of paradise you only see in glossy travel magazines, promising breathtaking sunsets and soothing ocean waves. But as the morning light filtered into the room, it revealed a stark contrast to the silence that had settled over the house. Something was wrong. The usual pre-trip commotion, James and his parents bustling about, the clatter of breakfast dishes, was missing. Instead, there was only an eerie, unsettling stillness. I grabbed my phone, the time glaring back at me, and a wave of panic surged through my stomach. I had overslept. But where was everyone? I hurried downstairs, the stillness of the house growing heavier with each step. Then I saw it, a note casually left on the kitchen counter. Didn't want to wake you. You seem tired. We'll see you when we get back. My hands shook as I gripped the note. James's words echoed in my mind, an excuse wrapped in the guise of thoughtfulness. Confusion and hurt swirled within me as I dialed his number, each ring dragging on painfully until his voice finally answered. Hey, you're awake, James greeted me, his tone almost too casual. We thought it'd be best to let you rest. The flight was smooth and the weather here is amazing. You would have loved it. How could you leave without even waking me? We planned this trip together. James sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the ocean between us. Sophia, we just thought you needed the sleep. Mom suggested it might be best to let you rest. And that's when it all fell into place. The subtle comments, the coolness in his parents' demeanor, the whispered conversations they thought I couldn't hear. This wasn't just James's decision, it was a collective choice. They never truly intended for me to be part of their family, not really. I needed to be there with you, with all of you. This trip mattered to me too, James. It's not just about missing a vacation, it's about being shut out of our family's life. There was a pause, the kind that lingers just long enough to let you know that the words coming next won't fix anything. I'm sorry you feel that way, Sophia. We'll talk when I get back, okay? Just try to enjoy the time at home. I love you. The line went dead, and so did something between us. As I stood in the silence of what used to be our shared home, I felt a resolve solidify within me. This wasn't just a wake-up call, it was a turning point. The James I thought I knew would never have left me behind, but the harsh reality was that he did, and with disturbing ease. The stillness of the house now felt suffocating, heavy with revelations that seemed to seep from every corner. As I moved from room to room, each space seemed to echo with memories, some once sweet, now bitterly tainted by the clarity of hindsight. As I put the picture back in place, my phone buzzed. It was Melissa, my best friend, her name flashing on the screen like a beacon of support. Sophia, how are you holding up? I just heard about what happened. Her voice was a comforting thread of normalcy, but as we spoke, I found my eyes opening even wider. Melissa, it's like I've been in the dark all this time. All these little moments are making sense now. Like last Christmas, James and his parents, they were always subtly pushing me out, weren't they? There was a pause, thick with unspoken understanding. Sophia, I didn't want to say anything before, but yes, I noticed it too. I thought it was just family dynamics, nothing more. My voice, edged with anger and sadness, cut through. I think you've been too good for them from the start. What are you going to do now? I moved to the window, watching a couple across the street laughing together as they walked their dog, so normal, so united. Turning away, I felt the sharp sting of isolation. I'm not sure yet, Melissa, but being left behind, it's more than a slap in the face. It's a wake-up call. Maybe it's time I start making decisions for myself, decisions that don't involve James. Good for you, Sophia. You deserve happiness, not this endless questioning of your place. As the call ended, my resolve solidified. I grabbed my laptop and began typing, not just jotting down thoughts or keeping a diary, but creating a list. A list of every slight, every dismissive comment, every instance where James or his parents made me feel insignificant. Later, as the dusk bathed the sky in shades of fading hope, my sister Anna called. She had always been my confidant, and now, more than ever, I needed her fierce, protective spirit. Sophia, Mom told me what happened with James. Are you okay? Her voice carried a blend of concern and anger, reflecting the turmoil I felt inside. No, Anna, I'm not okay. But maybe that's a good thing. I'm finally seeing things clearly. I can't keep being the only one fighting to make this work. It feels like I've been competing for James's affection against his own family. Remember last Easter when you hosted dinner and Elaine insisted on redoing the table settings? It was like she needed to assert her control, even in your own home. Exactly. It's always been them first and me a distant second. I felt like an outsider in my own marriage. Whatever you choose to do, we're here for you. We all see you for who you are and love you. That night, I went to bed with a notebook by my side. The pages quickly filled with plans and ideas. No longer just dreams, but concrete steps to take. Tonight, I allowed myself to fully embrace the weight of my heartache, using it as the foundation for the strength I would need to rebuild. As the morning light filtered through the blinds, it cast long shadows across the room, where I sat amidst a sea of scattered papers and notes. Each document was a piece of the puzzle that was my marriage, emails, texts, and photos, laid out as evidence of the many ways I had been sidelined. My phone rested beside me, displaying the contact information for a recommended divorce attorney. It was time to move forward. Taking a deep breath, I dialed the number. The line clicked, and a calm, professional voice answered, "Good morning, you've reached Carter and Associates. How can we assist you today?" "Hi, I'm Sophia. A friend referred me to you. I'd like to discuss my options for a divorce." "Of course, Sophia. I'm Alyssa, one of the attorneys here. Let's start by discussing your situation in detail." The conversation that followed was both surreal and empowering. Alyssa's questions were sharp and to the point, cutting through the haze of my emotions to focus on the facts. She listened attentively as I described the events leading up to and following the trip that James and his parents took without me. "From what you've shared, it seems you've been facing not only personal betrayal but also a pattern of exclusion and possibly emotional manipulation," Alyssa observed. "Documenting everything was a wise decision. It will be crucial in building a strong case for you." After the call, I was filled with a mix of nervousness and determination. Thinking about divorce was one thing, but initiating the process felt like a major step forward. There was no turning back now. I needed support, and I knew exactly who to reach out to next. Laura, a close friend who had stood by me during the toughest times of my marriage, picked up on the second ring. "Sophia, hi, how are you holding up?" "Not great, Laura, but I'm taking action. I spoke with a divorce attorney." "Wow, Sophia, that's a big step. How are you feeling about it?" "Determined, I suppose." "Laura, can I ask for your help? I might need a statement from someone who's witnessed what I've been through." "Absolutely, Sophia. I've seen how they've treated you, especially James's mom. It always seemed like you could never do anything right in her eyes." "Thank you, Laura. Your support means a lot to me." Energized by my friend's support and the clear direction from the attorney, I spent the next few hours organizing my documents and detailing everything that had transpired. While I worked, my sister Anna texted, her words offering comfort to my weary heart. "Just checking in, sis. You're making the right choice. We're all behind you." By evening, I had assembled a detailed file, texts, emails, and painful reminders, all laid out, revealing my life's raw truths. Instead of feeling exposed, I felt strengthened. Each piece of evidence marked a move away from my past and toward a fresh start. The sound of the front door opening reverberated through the house like the harbinger of a storm. My heart raced, not with fear, but with a firm resolve. As James walked in, his face etched with travel fatigue, our eyes locked. The usual pleasantries faltered, hanging awkwardly between us. "Sophia, you seem different." "I am different, James. We need to talk." His brows furrowed in confusion as he set down his bags. "Talk about what? What's going on?" I gestured toward the living room, where I had spread out the documents and photos, evidence of every moment I felt pushed aside by him and his parents. "James, this isn't just about your trip to Hawaii without me. It's about every instance where you prioritized them over me, every time I was made to feel like an outsider in my own marriage." He looked at the documents, his expression shifting from confusion to worry. "I don't understand. Are these divorce papers?" "Yes, they are. I've consulted a lawyer, James." "I can't do this anymore." His voice wavered, laced with a mix of anger and desperation. "Sophia, why are you doing this? We can talk it out, go to counseling. You're blowing this way out of proportion." I shook my head, unwavering. "It's not out of proportion to want to feel valued, James. Your mother's constant interference and your silent complicity with her, it's suffocating. I'm not just an extension of your family. I'm your wife, or at least I was supposed to be. But I love you, Sophia. I just thought." "Thought what?" "That I'd stay silent and accept the scraps of attention you and your parents decided to give me. No, James, this ends now. He began to pace, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration and disbelief. So that's it? You're just going to throw away everything we've built because of a few misunderstandings? They're not misunderstandings, James. They're part of a pattern, a series of choices you've consistently made. And now, I'm making my own. His expression hardened as he glanced at the paperwork once more. If this is what you want, I won't stand in your way. But I think you're making a mistake. I've made mistakes before, I said, my voice steady. Staying any longer would be another one. As he sifted through the papers, his movements slow and deliberate, the gravity of our fractured relationship became unmistakable. This confrontation was painful but necessary, a decisive moment that marked the end of my resignation and the beginning of a new path for me. James, this isn't just about our relationship. It's about me reclaiming my self-worth. You might not understand it now, but I hope you will one day. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the chasm that had grown too wide to cross. As he collected the papers, a look of bitter acceptance in his eyes, I felt a mix of sorrow and relief. This confrontation, though heart-wrenching, provided the closure I needed, the crucial step towards reclaiming my voice and my life. The early morning sun bathed the boxes stacked in my living room in a warm glow, each one meticulously labeled: books, art supplies, memories. Today wasn't just another day. It marked the beginning of my new life in a new city, a concrete step toward the future I had chosen for myself. As I taped up another box, my phone rang. It was Rachel, a friend who had relocated to the same city last year. Her voice was brimming with enthusiasm. Sophia, I heard the big news. Welcome to the neighborhood. When do you get here? Hi, Rachel. I'm actually packing up the van today. I should arrive by tomorrow evening. I'm so ready for this fresh start. That's fantastic. You're going to love it here. And guess what? I've already planned a little get-together this weekend. Consider yourself invited. Laughter bubbled up inside me, light and freeing. That sounds wonderful, Rachel. I really appreciate it. It's been a while since I've looked forward to something like this. After ending the call, I returned to packing, but it wasn't long before another call came through. This time, it was the HR manager from the design firm where I had recently been offered a job. Sophia, good morning. I'm calling to confirm your start date with us. We're all excited to have you on board. How does Monday sound for coming in and getting settled? That sounds perfect, I replied, a smile spreading across my face. I'm really looking forward to it. It feels like just the change I needed. Fantastic. We're confident you'll bring a lot of fresh ideas and energy to the team. See you Monday, Sophia. As I hung up, a wave of accomplishment washed over me. Everything was falling into place, not by chance, but by my own choice. I paused to enjoy the stillness of the morning, reflecting on the journey that had led me here. With the final box sealed, I took one last look around the house that had been my world, filled with both joy and sorrow. Now it stood empty, a blank canvas waiting for its next chapter. But I was ready to create something new, something entirely my own. And with that, we reached the end of Sophia's journey toward reclaiming her life and embracing a new beginning. What do you think was the pivotal moment that set Sophia on her path to independence? Was it the initial betrayal or her decisive move to take legal action? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know which moment resonated with you the most. If you enjoyed Sophia's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. Your support helps us bring more stories like Sophia's to you.